Chapter 171. Leader, it's the leader. Great, the leader is here to save us. The terrified mercenaries of the giant evil mercenary group looked at the approaching figure, their faces full of hope. As if they had suddenly gained motivation, they all fled in the direction of the giant crocodile mercenary group's leader. It was hard for Gray not to notice the huge commotion caused by the dust and the thunderous roar. His response to this was whoosh. He appeared in front of a giant crocodile mercenary group again and cut him in half. The other party's face was still filled with joy at the arrival of his own mercenary group's leader. When the man arrived, Gray had just killed the last fleeing giant crocodile mercenary group's mercenary group. Seeing the last member of his mercenary group being killed by Gray, the giant crocodile mercenary group's leader's face was distorted with anger. This was a man with slightly dark skin, but his face was distorted with anger and looked extremely frightening. He was the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary group and a ferocious blood warrior. The reason he had come to a small place like Azure Dragon Town was because he had his eyes on the profits from the usnea grass. Although the usnea grass was not too expensive, only worth a few gold coins, when there was enough of it, it was still a terrifying amount of wealth. It was even more profitable than the few mercenary missions he had taken. Therefore, he had brought his mercenary group here, preparing to harvest all the usnea grass produced in the Azure Sea Forest near Azure Dragon Town. Relying on his own strength and the strength of the giant crocodile mercenary group, he had robbed other mercenary groups and quickly earned a considerable amount of money. Because of this, he was in a good mood and had asked his mercenary group to invite a few beautiful women from the city, living a life of indulgence every day. However, just now he had heard that someone was causing trouble. He immediately felt that he needed to establish his authority, so he had rushed over personally. However, he did not expect to see his own mercenary group being hunted down. Even though he had shouted at them, the other party had no intention of stopping. "Sir, what is your name?" Taking a deep breath and suppressing the anger in his heart, he stared coldly at Gray. Judging from the situation just now, Gray's strength was at least that of an upper-level blood warrior. Moreover, he looked so young. It was obvious that this young man must have some background. "Gray Fergus," Gray said calmly as he lightly swung the magic sword to get rid of the bloodstains on it. "The Fergus family?" The dark-skinned man carefully tried to recall, but he could not find any memories related to this family. His gaze became even colder as he spoke in a cold voice. "There is no such family in Oka Marquis-Dom. Are you from outside the Marquis-Dom? So what if I am?" Gray's expression did not change, even when he was stared at by the man's increasingly cold gaze. "Good, very good, very good." The dark-skinned man's eyes were as cold as ice. "I don't know how my giant crocodile mercenary group offended you, but since you've killed my men, leave your life behind." With dozens of mercenaries killed, the giant crocodile mercenary group was practically crippled. If he had come from a noble family within the Marquis-Dom of Oka, he could only suffer this loss today. Although the giant crocodile mercenary group was powerful, they still did not dare to lay their hands on a noble within the Marquis-Dom of Oka. Otherwise, what awaited them would be a bounty from the Marquis family. But if the other party was a noble from outside the Marquis-Dom, then there was not so much to worry about. Even if they killed the other party, the Orca family would not do anything to them because the other party's noble status was not recognized within the Marquis-Dom of Oka. Boom, boom, boom. He ran wildly toward Gray, the ground trembling with every step. It was as if the one running at this moment was not a human, but a human-shaped giant elephant. Moreover, with every step he took, the aura on his body became stronger and stronger. When he was only a few meters away from Gray, this aura reached its peak. Suddenly, he pulled out the war blade at his waist, jumped up, and violently slashed at Gray. Whoosh! Gray's expression was calm. Facing the violent slash of the blade, the magic sword in his hand was surrounded by lightning, and he also slashed at the other party with great force. Boom! A loud sound like that of a huge drum rang out. A few mercenaries who were watching the show nearby heard a buzzing in their ears and almost lost their balance and fell to the ground. The violent force collided between the blade and the sword, and electric sparks crackled. Pa pa pa. Then, the two figures retreated rapidly, leaving a series of deep footprints. However, Gray retreated slightly less, while the dark-skinned man retreated slightly more. In fact, the dark-skinned man's blood technique was also strong in the aspect of strength. In terms of strength, there was not much difference between him and Gray. However, the magic sword in Gray's hand was enhanced by the power of lightning, so its power was naturally stronger than the dark-skinned man's attack. Ferocious blood warrior, no wonder you dare to be so arrogant. As he retreated, the dark-skinned man snorted coldly. He stomped on the ground, and a deep pit appeared. His figure dashed out like a tank, charging at Gray. Magic weapon? Facing the dark-skinned man charging at him, Gray raised his eyebrows. Just now, the lightning did not follow the flow of the other party's battle blade into the other party's body, as if it was restrained. Obviously, the battle blade in the other party's hand was also a magic weapon, which was why it could block the invasion of his lightning. Whoosh! He also moved, charging at the dark-skinned man. However, just as he was about to reach the dark-skinned man, his speed suddenly increased. He quickly appeared in front of the dark-skinned man and made the first move before the dark-skinned man could make a move. So fast, Gray suddenly appeared in front of the dark-skinned man and quickly slashed at him with his sword. The dark-skinned man was shocked, and he quickly blocked with his sword. Clang! Gray's sword was blocked, but the dark-skinned man was forced to retreat by the force of the sword. He hurriedly blocked, but naturally could not block Gray's full attack. Whoosh! After slashing the dark-skinned man back, Gray quickly chased after him like a shadow. Looking at Gray, the dark-skinned man secretly cursed. He gritted his teeth, and the sword in his hand suddenly flashed red. Then he slashed at Gray. Whoosh! A flaming blade suddenly appeared, separated from the sword in the dark-skinned man's hand, and slashed at Gray. This should be the ability of the magic weapon in the other party's hand. Crackle! The flaming blade suddenly attacked. Gray raised his eyebrows, and the sword in his hand flashed with lightning, forming a cross and slashing at the flaming blade. Boom! The flaming blade was shattered, but Gray also paused slightly because of his attack. Although he immediately rushed at the dark-skinned man after making his move, the dark-skinned man relied on the moment when Gray paused just now to stabilize his body and adjust. At the same time, he roared and suddenly stomped on the ground. As he stomped on the ground trembled, and there was a rumbling sound. The soil suddenly tumbled out, rushing a few meters high, like a mudslide rushing towards Gray. Looking at the mudslide rushing towards him, Gray's eyes showed a trace of seriousness. He used the ice wind blade, and a slightly sparkling green light slashed out. Poof! The tumbling mudslide was split in half from the middle. Moreover, ice spread and directly attached to the surface of the mudslide, preventing it from tumbling. Whoosh! Gray was like a swift lightning, passing through the gap in the middle of the mudslide. He arrived in front of the dark-skinned man and slashed at his throat. Clang! Facing the sudden approach of Gray, who blocked his blood beast ability, the dark-skinned man hurriedly waved his sword to block. The sword and Gray's sword collided, forcing Gray's sword to deviate from its original direction. However, Gray's sword slid down and directly slashed at the dark-skinned man's abdomen. Poof! There was a sharp pain in his abdomen, and the dark-skinned man was directly sent flying. The expensive armor on his body was cut open, and there was a shallow wound on his abdomen. If not for the armor's protection, he would have been cut open by Gray. However, even so, he still did not have an easy time. The violent thunder and lightning entered his body through the wound, directly electrocuting it black. Not only that, but the electric current also flowed into the dark-skinned man's body. The dark-skinned man suddenly trembled unnaturally, and the sword in his hand almost slipped. His entire body was numb. Bang! He slammed hard into a tree, and the whole tree was broken by him. He fell to the ground in a sorry state. Whoosh! Gray naturally would not miss such an opportunity. With his terrifying speed, he took a few steps and was already close to the dark-skinned man. The demonic sword was aimed at the dark-skinned man's throat. The dark-skinned man's entire body was numb, and his body was uncontrollably trembling. He tried to raise his sword to block, but it was too late. The demonic sword quickly pierced down. Poof! The dark-skinned man's throat was pierced, but no blood flowed out because the violent thunder and lightning had blocked all of this. His throat was completely char-black. Not only that, but there were also scorch marks all over his body, and his hair looked as if it had been permed. The dark-skinned man's originally slightly dark skin had become pitch black, like a coal miner. Chapter 172. The leader of the giant mercenary corps is dead. When Gray killed the giant mercenary corps, the surrounding mercenaries who had been bullied by the giant crocodile mercenary corps couldn't help but clap and cheer secretly. What Gray was doing was something they didn't dare to do. Now that someone had finally done it, they were delighted. However, when the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary corps arrived and attacked Gray, they couldn't help but secretly worry for Gray. Gray's strength did seem strong, but it was rumored that the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary corps was a ferocious warrior. Would Gray be a match for him? Therefore, when Gray not only blocked the attack of the giant crocodile mercenary corps' leader, but also killed him without suffering any injuries, they were shocked. The leader of the giant crocodile mercenary corps, rumored to have the strength of a ferocious warrior, died just like that. The giant crocodile mercenary corps, which was rather famous in Marquis Oka's territory, was finished just like that. What they saw in front of them felt unreal. Not only does it have the sharpness of a wind blade, but it also has cold air. Miss, what kind of blood fiend ability is this? The lady in orange was surprised as she looked at the purple-haired Lady Sophia and asked, "If I'm not wrong, he should be practicing the blood technique of the Wind Wolf sequence. This should be a mutated wind blade." Sophia raised her eyebrows slightly. The blood technique of the Wind Wolf sequence? But miss, from the exchange just now, his strength doesn't seem to be inferior to the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary corps, who obviously specializes in strength. The lady in red frowned at the side. Not only has the blood fiend's ability mutated, but his strength has also mutated. Even his defense might have mutated. The purple-haired Lady Sophia explained. The blood fiend's ability has mutated, and so has its strength and defense. The brown-bearded man, Teresa, had a slightly surprised expression. Ever since his encounter with Gray in the remains, he had been rather unhappy with Gray. His miss had allowed him to explore the remains with her, which was already giving him special care. Yet, he was still pushing his luck and didn't know when to back down. Originally, he thought that the other party was an arrogant youth who had some strength. Now, it seemed that although he still couldn't escape the impression of arrogance, at least the other party should have some confidence, which was why he didn't show any fear when facing the four of them. Of course, in his opinion, the other party's confidence was nothing much. If the four of them really wanted to deal with the other party, the strength that the other party had displayed was completely insufficient. Gray took the purse of the giant crocodile mercenary group's leader and put the magic weapon back into its scabbard into its backpack. He looked at the purple-haired girl, Sophia, and the others before walking toward Greenvine Town. His horse was still in the stables of the tavern in town, and he had not checked out of his hotel room. After resting in the tavern for a day, Gray checked out the next day and left Greenvine Town on horseback, preparing to return home. Although there had been an accident during this search for the ruins, and they had unexpectedly met the purple-haired girl Sophia and the other three in the ruins, they had still gained a lot. Just the gold coins alone were more than 1 million, and in addition, there were 2 magic weapons and 2 blood spell books. Most importantly, one of them was the blood spell book of the Wind Wolf sequence that he needed the most. On this point, he had to thank the purple-haired girl, Sophia, for she actually had the blood spell book of the Wind Wolf sequence. And these were not his greatest gains. His greatest gain was naturally the ability to control corpses. The strength of this ability was obvious, and in theory, there was almost no limit to it. After all, as the number of blood fiends that he could control increased, and the strength of the blood fiends that he could control increased, the effect of this ability would become stronger. Of course, this was only in theory, and in reality, there should be a limit. Although he had not reached the limit of the number of blood fiends that he could control, Gray estimated that there should be a limit to the number of blood fiends that he could control. It was just that he had not reached that limit yet. Moreover, although in theory, this ability could control the corpses of powerful blood fiends, where to find the corpses of powerful blood fiends was a problem. But even so, there was no need to doubt the strength of this ability. After leaving Black Sieve Town on horseback and riding on a remote and uninhabited road, Gray came to a clearing in the forest near him. All of a sudden, 9 huge creatures rushed out quickly and approached him. They were the 9 blood fiends that he was controlling. The ability to control blood fiends was his trump card, and he did not want anyone to know about it. Hence, he ordered the 9 blood fiends to take a detour to this clearing in the forest and wait for his arrival. With the 9 blood fiends, Gray continued on his journey. Along the way, he also stopped at cities, towns, and villages and arranged for the 9 blood fiends to stay in the forest nearby. The speed of traveling alone was naturally extremely fast. Even if he did not rush at full speed, he was already quite close to the border between Sydney territory and Oka territory after 5 days. The sun was about to set, and the sky was crimson. Just as Gray thought that he would have to spend the night outdoors, a small town appeared in front of him. Judging from its size, it should be a small town with a population of 10 to 20,000. Ordering the 9 blood fiends to hide in the nearby forest, Gray rode towards the small town. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, a large number of black arrows suddenly appeared. Cutting through the air, they brought with them a terrifying whistling sound. They were densely packed and galloped towards him. Whoosh! Gray's expression changed. Slapping the horse's back with his left hand, he jumped down from the horse and quickly dodged to the side. Although he had infrared perception, he could not detect the enemy in advance this time because the enemy attacked while hiding from his infrared perception. Puff, puff, puff! Gray's warhorse, which he had spent more than 10 gold coins on, was shot into a hedgehog. Even so, Gray was still unable to completely dodge the arrows. There were too many black arrows covering a wide area and moving at an extremely fast speed. They were even faster than the sharp blades and traps that Gray had encountered in the remains. Even though Gray's reaction was extremely fast, dozens of black arrows still hit his body. Although he was wearing the Iron Rhino inner armor, the Iron Rhino inner armor was only a vest. It could only protect the torso, leaving the head and limbs exposed. Clink, clink, clink. At this moment, the defensive characteristics of the Shadow Snake saved him. The arrows that hit his body were as if they had hit steel. They merely pierced through his clothes and were powerless. The most dangerous arrow even shot directly at his head, but it didn't even leave a scar. After a wave of arrow rain, the ground was covered with arrows. However, very quickly, the arrows dissipated like black smoke. This is the ability of the blood fiends. Seeing this scene, Gray immediately judged in his heart. No wonder he felt that the arrows were much more powerful than those shot by ordinary archers. It was the ability of the blood fiends. Who wants to kill me? Did Sophia and the rest go back on their words, or? Gray hurriedly ordered the 9 blood fiends to come at full speed. Rumble. At this moment, a rumbling sound was heard. A large amount of soil and rocks rolled up to a height of several meters. It was like a surging flood, rushing towards Gray. Gray growled. Han icy wind blades slashed out to meet the flood of soil and rocks. At the same time, he already had a guess about the person or force that wanted to kill him. The blood fiends had the same ability as the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary group. Without a doubt, the person who wanted to assassinate him was definitely related to the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary group. Poof! The flood of soil and rocks was split into 2 by the icy wind blade and froze. Whoosh! Passing through the cracks in the frozen soil and rocks, Gray drew his sword and rushed towards the person who used the mudslide attack. Very quickly, he saw this person. This was a man with a buzz cut and wearing black battle armor. He held an extremely long and wide sword in his hand. Whoosh! Looking at Gray, who was rushing towards him, he did not retreat. Instead, he stepped on the ground and slashed at Gray with the extremely long and wide sword in his hand. There was a white glow on the sword. It was obviously a magical weapon. Whoosh! Gray quickly dodged to the side. Poof! The man's saber slashed the ground, leaving a deep crack in it. Whoosh! After dodging the man's attack, Gray appeared beside the man. Just as he was about to slash at the man, he suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air behind him. He quickly dodged and looked behind him. He saw a man of medium build in gray battle armor holding a long spear. The tip of the spear was surrounded by a green glow. Together with the buzz-cut man, they surrounded Gray in the middle. Gray Fergus, you killed a member of the Misty family. Do you think you can escape? The man of medium build locked onto Gray with his spear. His eyes were cold as he looked at Gray. The giant crocodile mercenary group belongs to the Misty family? Gray raised his eyebrows. Gray had heard of the Misty family before. It was an earl family in the Marquis of Oka. He did not expect the giant crocodile mercenary group to belong to this family. What, you don't know? Hearing that Gray did not know the relationship between the giant crocodile mercenary group and the Misty family, the man of medium build snorted coldly. The fact that the giant crocodile mercenary group was a subsidiary of the Misty family was an open secret among the nobles in the Marquis of Oka. Gray traveled alone and almost never entered the cities. He would only spend the night in the cities, towns, and villages in the evening. When they found out about this while tracking Gray, they thought that Gray was avoiding the revenge of the Misty family. I don't care if you know the relationship between the giant crocodile mercenary group and the Misty family. Since you killed a member of the Misty family, don't think about leaving Oka alive. The buzz-cut man said coldly. His eyes were cold. He and the leader of the giant crocodile mercenary group were both selected from the soldiers of the Misty family. They also cultivated the same blood technique. The two of them were very close. Chapter 173. I really didn't know about the relationship between the giant crocodile mercenary group and the Misty family. Gray's expression remained calm as he faced the two ferocious blood warriors, the short-haired man and the average-sized man. When he heard the short-haired man's words, he looked at the short-haired man and said, "But since I've already offended you, there's nothing I can do." At this point, he paused for a moment. "I can only kill the two of you. You think you can?" The short-haired man was enraged, and the veins on his hand that was holding the saber were bulging. The spear-wielding man's expression did not change, but his eyes became colder. "Although I have some confidence in my own strength, I'm not so arrogant as to think that I can kill two ferocious blood warriors." Gray shook his head. "After obtaining them, I've been looking for an opportunity to use them to test their combat strength. Today, I might as well test it out on you." Hearing Gray's words, the short-haired man and the middle-aged man had a bad feeling. They looked at each other and prepared to attack Gray. Thump, thump, thump. However, at this moment, the two of them suddenly felt a huge commotion coming from their surroundings. They looked around frantically, and their faces instantly turned pale. Blood fiends were flying toward them from all four directions. Among these blood fiends, there were some that they recognized and some that they didn't. In total, there were 9 blood fiends. They were surrounded by 9 blood fiends. 9 blood fiends that were comparable to the ferocious blood warriors. They suddenly felt their scalps go numb. At this moment, they were surprised to see that Gray had taken the initiative to face these blood fiends. However, these blood fiends did not attack Gray at all. At this moment, they finally understood what Gray had meant by this guy can control blood fiends. How could you not find out such important information? The person in charge of intelligence should eat sh*t. They really wanted to push the person in charge of intelligence from the Misty family to the ground and eat sh*t. How could he not find out such important information? Just as their hearts turned cold, the 9 blood fiends had already attacked them. Thump, thump, thump. The first to charge at them was a blood fiend covered in yellowish-brown scales. It looked like a gigantic moving rock. Find a chance to escape. The short-haired man had an ugly expression as he spoke to the middle-aged man. The long saber in his hand carried an aura that could split mountains and rivers as he slashed at the rock-like blood fiend. Boom! The short-haired man grimaced in pain as he was pushed back by the impact of the collision. He felt as if he had slashed at a steel plate, and the rebounding force caused his hands to ache faintly. Even though he managed to shatter the scales of the blood fiend, that was all. This kind of injury was merely a superficial wound on the blood fiend's body. Before he could stabilize his body, he suddenly felt a strong wind coming from the side, and he immediately cursed in his heart. "Be careful!" The middle-sized man thrust his spear in that direction, helping the short-haired man out of the predicament. Puff! The spear collided with a claw that was swinging down, and the spear pierced through the claw, causing dark red blood to spill out. The middle-aged man was delighted to see that his attack had worked. However, the next moment, he suddenly felt a burning sensation on his back. His body could not help but roll forward. Behind him, a slender blood fiend covered in purple spots appeared. It clawed at his back, tearing through his battle armor and leaving 4 hideous wounds on his body. Then, it sent him flying with a slap. Vic, seeing that his companion was injured, the short-haired man was worried and wanted to rush over to save him. However, before he could make a move, a huge fist covered in white fur came from behind him and fiercely hammered at his back. Boom! He felt as if he had been hit by a huge hammer. His back was numb from the pain, and his body leaned forward uncontrollably. In front of him was a blood fiend with a sharp horn on its head. It lowered its head and charged at him with its horn. She dodged in a panic. Although she managed to avoid the stab of the horn, she was still grazed, and a deep wound appeared on her body. Outside the 9 blood fiends, Gray watched quietly as the short-haired man and the middle-aged man were surrounded and beaten by the 9 blood fiends. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. This was the most realistic portrayal of the 2 men. Because they were armed with magical weapons, their strength was not inferior to any of the 9 blood fiends. However, it was a pity that they were not fighting 1-on-1 or 1-on-2. Instead, they were fighting 1-on-4 or 1-on-5. On average, each of them would be besieged by at least 4 blood fiends. Faced with such a huge disparity in numbers, the 2 men were like 2 lonely boats in a raging sea, struggling bitterly. "I'll go to hell." The short-haired man was in despair. Faced with such a large number of blood fiends, he could not even escape. Ignoring the blood fiends that were attacking him from the side, he stomped on the ground and used the blood fiend's ability. The ground immediately rumbled, and a mudslide several meters high rushed towards the 2 blood fiends in front of him. This was a gamble. If he could eliminate the 2 blood fiends in front of him in this way, he might have a chance of winning. However, at this moment, 2 more blood fiends appeared in front of the 2 blood fiends. One of them was covered in yellowish-brown scales and looked like a moving giant rock. The other one had 2 horns on its head and a sturdy body that was 3 meters long. The 2 blood fiends directly collided with a mudslide that was several meters high. Boom! The 2 blood fiends were enveloped by the mudslide, but the momentum of the mudslide was also blocked. Bang! At this moment, the blood fiend that was attacking him from the side had arrived. It was a tiger-shaped blood fiend with black fur all over its body. With a sudden pounce, the short-haired man was pushed to the ground. After being pushed to the ground by the black tiger-shaped blood fiend, the short-haired man struggled with all his might. However, at this moment, a yellowish-brown scale blood fiend that was covered in mud from head to toe walked over. It was one of the 2 blood fiends that had been submerged by the mudslide. It approached the short-haired man and stomped on him together with the black tiger-shaped blood fiend. No matter how hard the short-haired man struggled, he could not move an inch. On the other side, the man with a medium build also used the blood fiend's ability in despair. Unfortunately, although his blood fiend's ability covered a wide area, it was not very powerful. Even an ordinary blood fiend would only suffer some superficial wounds. As for the blood fiends with strong defensive abilities, they were not harmed at all. In the end, like the short-haired man, he was pushed to the ground and pressed down. Seeing that the battle was over, Gray slowly walked toward the 2 blood fiends that were pressed down. In the face of a powerful attack, the blood fiends with strong defensive abilities took the initiative to protect the weaker blood fiends. In the face of an enemy, they cooperated with each other. Some of them harassed the enemy from the front, while others attacked from behind. This was the result of Gray's command. Gray could tell that these 9 blood fiends that were controlled by his ability to control corpses had basic battle instincts. They would attack the enemy and evade the enemy's attacks. However, if he wanted them to cooperate with each other further, this kind of high-difficulty brain reaction was not possible. If I don't command them, some of the blood fiends might die. Gray estimated in his heart as he walked toward the 2 blood fiends. The price he paid for capturing the 2 alive was that one of the blood fiend's claws was pierced and a few of the blood fiends suffered some superficial wounds. This was all thanks to his command. Otherwise, under the attacks of the short-haired man's blood fiends, some of the blood fiends might have died. Gray walked up to the man with short hair, who was covered in dirt and grime, and looked down at him from above. Other than the 2 of you, did the Mesfi family send anyone else to kill me? Bah! Don't even think about hearing any news about the Mesfi family from me. With 2 blood fiends pressing down on him, the short-haired man could not move at all. When he heard Gray's question, he spat and turned his head to the side. In the face of the other party's unwillingness to cooperate, Gray did not mind and said with a smile, "Even if you don't say it, I can guess that there aren't many ferocious blood warriors even in the Mace family. So, I'm guessing that only the 2 of you came to kill me this time." Hearing Gray's analysis, the short-haired man turned around and said coldly, "Just wait and see. Just you wait. You won't have a good ending after offending the Messi family. You don't have to worry about that." Gray sneered and did not say anything else. He was ready to draw his sword and kill the man. However, he thought of something and stopped. Instead, he bent down and pulled out the dagger he obtained from the secret room in the ruins. This was a good opportunity to find out what the dagger's ability was. Thinking of this, he infused the dagger with his blood force and gently cut the arm of the short-haired man. A bloody wound appeared on the short-haired man's arm and blood flowed out. Green. Seeing the blood flowing out, Gray raised his eyebrows and stood to the side, quietly waiting for the result. After the dagger cut the arm of the short-haired man, he immediately struggled like a mad beast. However, he could not break free from the 2 blood fiends that were known for their strength. After a while, the short-haired man stopped struggling and collapsed weakly. Dark green liquid flowed out of his 7 orifices. Gray reached out to check the other party's breath and found that he was completely dead. Poison. Judging from a wound on the short-haired man, the dagger should be of the poison attribute. Gray put away the dagger and walked towards the man with a medium build. "Let me go and I will ask the family to give up on killing you." Seeing the short-haired man die in pain, the man with a medium build turned pale and begged for mercy. "Do you think there is still room for negotiation?" The corner of Gray's mouth curled up into a sneer. He pulled out his sword and stabbed the middle of the man's back. Chapter 174. After searching their bodies, Gray obtained a total of over 3,000 gold coins and 2 magic weapons. He then began to use his ability to control corpses. He was forced to give up on the corpse of the giant crocodile mercenary band's leader because there were people present, but he didn't intend to give up on the corpses of these 2. Even if the ferocious warriors had lost their blood fiends and couldn't use blood force, they were still stronger than high-ranked ferocious blood warriors. He naturally couldn't miss this opportunity. A meatball full of tentacles fell onto the body of the short-haired man and crawled towards his mouth. However, when it reached the mouth of the short-haired man and came into contact with the green blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth, it suddenly stopped moving. Sure enough, I can't control those poisoned to death. Seeing this, Gray wasn't surprised. He had already guessed this before, and this was why he gave up on the dagger and used a sword to kill the man of medium build. Coming to the corpse of the man of medium build, another meatball appeared and crawled into the man's mouth. The man's body began to tremble slightly, and after a short while, the man slowly got up. Dull eyes, pale skin. It's fine from afar, but it's easy to find abnormalities up close. Sizing up the man of medium build standing in front of him, Gray came to the conclusion that it wasn't feasible to disguise him as a normal person and keep him by his side. Leave Okamar Kiate as soon as possible. Knowing that he was being targeted by the Mesfi family, Gray didn't go to the city in front of him, and instead hurried to leave Okamar Kiate overnight. As a Count's family, The Messy family should have berserk warriors if nothing unexpected happened. Currently, although he could control 9 blood fiends and 1 ferocious blood warrior, these 9 blood fiends and 1 ferocious blood warrior were all weakened. He didn't have absolute confidence in contending against a berserk warrior, so he could only choose to avoid them for the time being. 2 days later, the Mesfi family's pursuit didn't come, but Gray had already entered the Serene Marquise. He didn't know if they were apprehensive after losing 3 ferocious blood warriors consecutively, or if they had given up after learning that Gray had entered the Serene Marquise. Putting the matter of the Mesfi family aside, Gray set out for the Fergus family with the 9 blood fiends and 1 ferocious blood warrior. 3 days later, he arrived at Viscount Fergus's territory. After temporarily settling the 9 blood fiends and the ferocious blood warrior in a forest near the Fergus family, Gray returned to Fergus Castle. Young's Fergus Fergus's Big brother, you're back. Just as Gray arrived at the main hall, a young girl wearing a white dress ran over and hugged Gray's arm. It was Sarah. Behind her was a young man and a young girl. They were Bernal and Caroline. Yes, I'm back. After dotingly rubbing Sarah's head, Gray looked at Bernal and Caroline and greeted them. Big brother Bernal, big sister Caroline. Gray, you're finally back. Among us 5 siblings, you're the first one to go out and travel. I'm so envious. Bernal smiled. As long as you have Gray's strength, Father will allow it. Caroline smiled and joked, which was rare for her. Oh, that's too much. Bernal had a bitter smile on his face. Caroline thought that Gray was still an upper blood warrior, but she knew that Gray was now a vicious blood warrior. If he had to wait until his strength reached the vicious blood warrior level before he could go out and travel, he wouldn't have the confidence even after 10 years. Viscount Fergus's study. You're back. Yes, Father. Viscount Fergus sized up Gray. After seeing the things in Gray's hands, he couldn't help but smile. It seems that you've gained a lot from this trip. These 2 weapons are magic weapons that I obtained by accident. Gray placed the 2 long blades on the desk. Gray prepared the dagger for his own use. The spear was still useful in the hands of the man with a medium build. Only these 2 blades were useless in his hands, so he handed them over to Viscount Fergus to handle. Magic weapons, and there are 2 of them. If you sell them, it won't be a problem for about 10,000 gold coins. Not bad. Viscount Fergus nodded. It was very good to be able to gain such a harvest from a trip. However, he soon discovered that in addition to the 2 blades in Gray's hands, there were also 2 books. He didn't see them because they were blocked by the 2 weapons. He couldn't help but ask in confusion. What are these 2 books? This is the Herculean Bull Sequence Blood Spell Book that can be cultivated to the Barbarian level. This is the Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book that can be cultivated to the Barbarian level. Gray placed the 2 books in front of Viscount Fergus and said, What? The Herculean Bull Sequence Blood Spell Book that can be cultivated to the Barbarian level? The Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book? Viscount Fergus's eyes widened. He quickly picked up the Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book and flipped it open. He looked at it in shock. Although it was a handwritten copy, the cultivation method recorded in it was undoubtedly the Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book based on his decades of experience of cultivating the Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book. He raised his head and looked at Gray in shock. Gray, where did you get these 2 blood spell books? Blood spell books were the foundation of a family's inheritance. Gray actually obtained 2 of them, and one of them was the Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book that the Fergus family urgently needed. This was of great significance to the Fergus family. I got the Herculean Bull Sequence from a ruin. I exchanged the Wind Wolf Sequence Blood Spell Book for the Herculean Bull Sequence Blood Spell Book with someone. Gray explained. After being questioned by Viscount Fergus for a long time, Gray was finally able to leave Viscount Fergus's study. He didn't give the magic coins he obtained from the ruin to Viscount Fergus. After all, magic coins were useful to him, and the Fergus family wasn't lacking in wealth now. Rock family. Father, the spies have sent back news. Gray Fergus has returned to Fergus Castle today. Viscount Locke's eldest son, Alfred, said. He's back. Very good. This way, we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Viscount Locke sneered slightly. If Gray hadn't suddenly gone out to travel, he would have done that long ago. Father, looking at Viscount Locke, Alfred wanted to say something but stopped. During this period, Viscount Locke had asked him to pay attention to the news of the Fergus family. He had a vague idea of Viscount Locke's plan when he connected it to the news he heard at the auction some time ago. It was precisely because of this speculation that he felt very uneasy. What do you want to ask? Viscount Locke raised his head and looked at Alfred. Father, are you planning to inform the Shadow Serpent of the news that the Fergus family discovered the Shadow Serpent hiding in the Olivier family? Yes, I do plan to do so. Viscount Locke nodded in agreement. Gray Fergus's talent is too strong. If we let him live and let the Fergus family continue to exist, our Rock family won't have the slightest chance. Because of the combat power displayed by Gray during the process of the Fergus family's medicinal herb caravan being attacked by bandits, the news that Gray was already a high-ranked blood warrior had spread throughout the Sydney Marquisdom. But Father, the Olivers were destroyed because of this. Alfred looked anxious. In his opinion, this was simply playing with fire. If things went wrong, the Rock family would end up like the Olivers. Viscount Locke waved his hand and interrupted Alfred. Chapter 175. Somewhere in the kingdom, in a dark living room, a skinny old man sat on the main seat. His eyes were sinister, and there was a gloomy aura around him. He looked like a venomous snake ready to bare its fangs at any moment. What do you three think of this news? He looked at the people sitting on both sides and asked. There were 3 people sitting on both sides of him. There were 2 on the left. One was a man with purple hair, and the other was a man with short brown hair. On the right was a woman wearing an eye patch. The 3 of them were the captains of the Shadow Serpents who had infiltrated the Sydney Marquis territory. According to our previous investigation, the Fergus family did gain a lot from the previous incident. The possibility of this news being true is very high. The purple-haired man said after some thought, but the source of this news is unknown. I'm worried that this is a plot by the Sydney family. The short brown-haired man frowned. Whether it's a plot or not, as long as this news is true, we can't let it go. The woman with the eye patch smiled cruelly. She looked at the skinny old man. Sir, let me go. Whether the Sydney family is plotting or not, I will make this Fergus family disappear forever. The skinny old man frowned and thought for a moment. Since the news is credible, then this Fergus family can't be left alive. However, the Fergus family is only a viscount's family. You don't have to do it yourself. Arrange for a few murderous assassins to do it. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days had passed since Gray returned to Fergus Castle. In these 10 days, besides training, he also attended some noble banquets. Viscount Fergus seemed to have the intention of letting the nobles circle know Gray, so he frequently brought him to various banquets. Because of the talent he showed, he was naturally very popular at the banquets. Many noble ladies looked at him with shining eyes. They were very interested in him. He was still underage and already an upper-level blood warrior. Everyone could see Gray's potential. If it was the original owner of this body, he would have already become arrogant. Fortunately, he was an adult after all. He had rich social experience, so he was not like this. Gray walked into a forest near the castle. As Gray walked into the forest, there was immediately a rustling sound. Very soon, 9 blood fiends and a ferocious blood warrior appeared before him. Gray walked forward and carefully sized up the 9 blood fiends and the ferocious blood warriors. I've had these corpses for more than 20 days, but there are no signs of decay. It seems that my previous guess was right. Besides controlling corpses, the ability to control corpses can also prevent them from decaying. Gray supported his chin with one hand and muttered to himself. This was undoubtedly good news. It could keep the corpse from rotting for a long time. In other words, it could be kept for a long time without destroying it. Under such circumstances, it was possible to increase the number of blood fiend corpses under his control. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible to have a large number of blood fiends if it rotted and disappeared while expanding. I have to find time to make a trip to the Red Leaf Forest to hunt more blood fiends and increase the number of blood fiends. I have to see if there's a limit to my control and what it is. Gray left after having the 9 blood fiends and the ferocious blood warrior hide in the forest. There were no villages in the vicinity of Fergus Castle, so naturally there were very few hunters. Hiding the 9 blood fiends and the man with a medium build here wouldn't be easy to discover. As for the regular patrols of the castle, Gray had already notified them and listed this place as one of the places where he usually trained. Without his permission, no one was allowed to enter. Night fell and enveloped Fergus Castle like a huge black cloth. Fergus Castle was lit up with specks of light. Silently, 5 figures shrouded in darkness headed for Fergus Castle. They avoided the sight of the castle's sentries and arrived in front of a wall at the side of the castle. After listening to the movements behind the wall, one of them gestured with his finger. The 5 of them immediately formed claws with their fingers. Like sharp claws, they clawed at the cracks in the wall and slowly climbed up the wall. They easily climbed up the wall that was 4 to 5 meters high and nimbly jumped into the castle. A patrol team of 4 from the Fergus family passed by. The 4 of them pounced over like a gust of wind. Each of them covered the mouth of the other, and with a slight twist, the 4 of them fell limp to the ground. After dinner, the Fergus family sat in the living room and chatted casually. "Sigh, I won't attend banquets with Gray anymore. Those noble ladies will only surround him when he attends. I can't even find a dance partner." Bernal sighed. Of course, this was an exaggeration. Although he wasn't as popular as Gray, he was still the eldest son of Viscount Fergus. How could he not even find a dance partner? He said this to liven up the atmosphere. "Is that so? I thought you didn't care about the other noble ladies because of Miss Bernice Evelyn's." Gray smiled and joked. "What are you talking about? Miss Bernice and I aren't." Bernal originally wanted to tease Gray, but he didn't expect to be teased by Gray. He couldn't help but blush slightly. "Is that so? That's a pity. I heard from my father that he had plans to unite with the Evelyns through marriage. Sigh, since you don't want to, my father should give up." Gray shook his head slightly. "Indeed, the Evelyns are an old baron family. They are one of the most likely families to be conferred the title of Viscount by Marquis Sidney. If the 2 families can unite through marriage, it will be beneficial for both sides. But since you don't want to, let's forget about it." It was hard to tell if Viscount Fergus was joking or serious. "No, I didn't say I don't like it." Bernal denied it with a red face. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. After chatting for a while, it was getting late. Everyone got up and prepared to go back to the bedroom to rest. The door to the living room opened. At this time, Bernal, who was a little agitated, was the first to walk out as if he was running away. Gray followed behind him. Walking out of the living room, Gray looked at the corridor casually. In the next moment, his expression changed abruptly. He grabbed Bernal's shoulder and pulled him back into the living room while shouting loudly. "Assassins!" Just now, in a casual glance, he actually found 2 shadows in the corridor. There were people in black who used shadow ability and crouched there. Swish! Swish! Just as Gray pulled Bernal into the living room, 2 shadows moved. 2 people rushed at Gray and Bernal. The weapons in their hands were dark as they attacked the 2. Puff! Puff! Because Gray and Bernal suddenly retreated into the living room, the attacks of the 2 people fell on the wall. The stone wall was easily pierced through like tofu. The 2 people casually waved their hands, and stone chips flew. The weapons turned around and attacked Gray and Bernal again. Whoosh! However, Gray burst out with terrifying speed and suddenly retreated into the living room with Bernal. Not good. In the living room, Viscount Fergus and the others all stood up. Hearing Gray shout and the sound of the sharp blade cutting through the wall, everyone's face changed greatly. Viscount Fergus reacted the fastest. He flipped his hand and took out a sword from the corner of the room. As a noble, assassination and being assassinated were common, so they would often hide some weapons in places they frequented. Bernal and the others were also looking for weapons. Bang! Bang! At this moment, the 2 windows in the living room suddenly shattered. 2 black shadows jumped in from the broken windows. After jumping in, the 2 people held weapons and rushed at the group. For a moment, assassins appeared outside and in the living room. After retreating into the living room, Gray immediately pulled out a sword from the place where he hid his weapons. At this time, the two people outside the living room just happened to rush to the door of the living room. Whoosh! With a burst of terrifying speed, Gray appeared in front of an assassin and slashed at the assassin's throat. Clang! Facing Gray's sudden burst of terrifying speed and a vicious slash at his throat, the assassin hurriedly used his dagger to block. However, the power transmitted from the dagger was beyond his imagination. Bang! He was directly knocked upside down and slammed into the wall of the corridor. The entire wall completely collapsed. Whoosh! As for the second assassin, facing Gray who was attacking his companion, he immediately attacked and slashed at Gray. Slash! At the same time as the second assassin's blade slashed down, Gray had already retreated. In the end, the second assassin's dagger brushed past Gray's throat. Several hairs could not dodge and were directly brushed by the sharp blade and fell to the ground. After dodging the second assassin's dagger, the sword in Gray's hand was as swift as lightning. It quickly slashed out and attacked the second assassin. Clang! The second assassin met the attack with his dagger and blocked it. Because he was already on guard, he was not sent flying by Gray's sword like his first companion. However, he was still shaken by the huge force from the sword and continuously retreated. All of you back off. These two people are not people you can deal with. Viscount Fergus faced the two assassins who broke through the window and attacked. They were obviously not weak. Viscount Fergus' expression was grave as he faced them. Behind him were Madame de Milan, Bernal, Sarah, and the others. He had to stop these two assassins, or they would definitely die. Pucci. Facing these two assassins, although Viscount Fergus had the advantage of speed, he did not have the strength characteristic like Gray. He could cleanly send one of them flying and form a one-on-one situation. After dodging the attack of one of them, he was slashed by the other. A wound immediately appeared on his abdomen, and blood dripped down. Helpless, he could only retreat a few steps and use a wind blade to attack the two of them. Facing the sudden attack of the wind blade, the two assassins immediately attacked together and slashed at the wind blade with their daggers. Chapter 176. After repelling the second assassin, Gray couldn't help but look in the direction of Viscount Fergus. Seeing that Viscount Fergus was already injured and was forced to use wind blades to block the two assassins, his heart couldn't help but sink. He had summoned the 9 blood fiends and the man with a medium build the moment he discovered the assassins. However, they weren't in the castle and would need at least a few minutes to rush over. He didn't know if Viscount Fergus could hold on until then. Moreover, there were obvious sounds of battle outside the living room. Clearly, there were other assassins aside from these 4. They were probably intercepting the guards that were rushing over. Although he was extremely worried about Viscount Fergus' situation, Gray couldn't help. After all, he was facing 2 ferocious warriors and didn't dare to be careless. Bang! He stomped on the ground fiercely, causing cracks to appear on the stone floor of the living room. His figure quickly shot out and attacked the assassin that was repelled by his sword. Clang, clang, clang. After 3 consecutive exchanges, the assassin's hands were numb from Gray's powerful attacks. The blade that was tightly held in front of him was shaken away. Shio! Gray's sword pierced straight into the assassin's heart. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a chill all over his body. He withdrew his sword without hesitation and blocked to the left. Swish! On his left, a blade suddenly appeared and slashed at his throat from the left. The attacker was the assassin who had been sent flying by him at the beginning. There were traces of blood on the assassin's forehead. He must have been injured when he crashed into the wall. However, he was a ferocious warrior after all and had a strong physique. He should have only suffered some superficial wounds that wouldn't affect his mobility. Clang! The blade that was aimed at his throat was blocked, but it wasn't completely blocked. The blade slashed downward and directly slashed toward Gray's chest. Slash! Gray's noble clothes, which were worth several gold coins, had a large cut on them. Fortunately, he had been wearing the iron rhino inner armor. Although his outer clothes were cut open, he wasn't injured because of the protection of the iron rhino inner armor. Swish! After dodging the danger, Gray backhanded his sword and attacked the assassin with a trace of blood on his forehead. Clang! The assassin with a slight trace of blood on his forehead blocked the attack with his dagger. At the cost of being forced back, he managed to block the attack. At this time, the assassin from before had regrouped and attacked Gray again. Gray could only turn to deal with this assassin. Could it be that Big Brother is already a ferocious blood warrior? Gray is a bloodthirsty warrior? That guy is actually a ferocious blood warrior. The doors and windows of the living room were blocked. Sarah and the others were forced to hide in the corner as much as possible. Everyone except for Bernal couldn't help but be shocked when they saw that Viscount Fergus had single-handedly blocked two powerful assassins. In fact, he seemed even more relaxed than Viscount Fergus. They all looked at Gray in shock. Clang, clang. Like walking on a tightrope, Gray relied on his superior speed and strength to withstand their combined attacks with great difficulty. It was still a bit difficult for him to face two ferocious blood warriors alone. Fortunately, apart from their terrifying assassination abilities, the two in front of him could only be considered average among the ferocious blood warriors. That was why he could barely block them. Even so, after fighting for a few minutes, injuries inevitably appeared on his body. His left hand had been slashed by one of the assassins. The only fortunate thing was that he had the defensive characteristics of a shadow snake. It was only a superficial wound that didn't affect his fighting ability. While they were fighting, a muffled groan suddenly entered Gray's ears. Hearing this groan, Gray's expression changed. Relying on the defensive characteristics of the shadow snake, he forced the two assassins to retreat at the cost of a light injury on his right arm. He then looked in the direction of Viscount Fergus. He saw that Viscount Fergus was being forced back by the attacks of the two assassins. There were already over a dozen wounds on his body, the most serious of which was on his chest. It extended from his left collarbone all the way to his right abdomen. A large amount of dark red blood was rapidly flowing out from there. If it wasn't treated in time, just the blood loss alone would take his life. Moreover, what worried him the most was that according to the sounds of fighting he had heard, Viscount Fergus had already used 3 wind blades in a row. Viscount Fergus didn't have much blood power left and probably didn't have the ability to use wind blades anymore. Gray immediately used an ice blade to slash at the two assassins fighting Viscount Fergus. Shio! The slightly sparkling green wind blade swiftly slashed at the two. Swish, swish. Facing Gray's attack from the other side, the two assassins fighting Viscount Fergus turned serious and simultaneously slashed at the ice wind blade. Gotcha! Under the combined efforts of the two, the wind blade was shattered. However, in the next moment, their expressions changed greatly. Although the wind blade was shattered, a terrifying cold air suddenly erupted and quickly attacked the two assassins. The temperature in the air plummeted. Swish, swish. The two of them continuously retreated to avoid it, but they couldn't help but be touched by some of the cold air. Ice crystals immediately appeared on their bodies and hands. The two of them immediately felt their bodies turn cold, and their movements suddenly became stiff. They no longer cared about the heavily injured Viscount Fergus and hurriedly pulled away to check on the condition of their bodies. Goo-goo, Viscount Fergus, who finally had a chance to catch his breath, took out a recovery potion and a healing potion without hesitation and drank them in a few gulps. As the potions were poured in, the blood power in his body quickly recovered, and the wounds that were rapidly bleeding also quickly stopped bleeding. After slashing at the two assassins with an ice wind blade, Gray didn't even have time to see the effects of the ice wind blade because at this moment, the two assassins that he had forced to retreat once again pounced at him and clashed with him once more. Another few minutes passed, and Gray, who was struggling to resist the two assassins, suddenly had a gleam in his eyes. He abruptly retreated and then unhesitatingly slashed his ice wind blade at the two assassins who were fighting with him. Swish, swish. The two assassins had already seen that although their companions had shattered the wind blade, they had been injured by the cold air and immediately chose to dodge. However, they still couldn't completely dodge. Although they weren't directly hit by the ice wind blade, they were still affected by the cold air that permeated the windblade. Their bodies were cold, and their movements became stiff. The two of them were shocked and hurriedly pulled away from Gray. Gray, who had slashed out the ice windblade, didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he suddenly turned his head to look in the direction where Viscount Fergus and the other two assassins were fighting. Although the two assassins fighting Viscount Fergus had been frostbitten by Gray's unexpected ice windblade, they weren't directly hit by the ice windblade, and their injuries weren't serious. After confirming that there were no problems, the two of them once again pounced at Viscount Fergus. Viscount Fergus, who had consumed a healing potion and a recovery potion, had recovered quite a bit and was barely able to block the two of them once more. However, even so, the power of blood had been depleted by now, and there were many more injuries on his body. It looked like he wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Without any hesitation, Gray used the power of blood and unleashed the last ice windblade that he could unleash, attacking the two assassins fighting Viscount Fergus. Swish! The ice wind blade attacked once more. The two assassins had learned their lesson from before and naturally wouldn't choose to block it head-on. They retreated without hesitation and dodged the ice wind blade that was attacking them. However, although they dodged the ice wind blade, they were still affected by the cold air because they were too close to the ice wind blade. Their bodies suddenly turned cold and couldn't help but stiffen. Swish! After unleashing the last ice wind blade, Gray quickly approached Sarah and the others who were hiding in the corner and shouted to Viscount Fergus, "Father, retreat quickly!" Viscount Fergus didn't understand Gray's intention, but he still subconsciously retreated to meet up with Gray and the others. What's going on? Seeing Gray and Viscount Fergus retreating to the corner and meeting up with Bernal, Sarah, and the others. The four assassins who had recovered from the effects of the ice wind blade were puzzled, but they still quickly pounced on Gray and the others. However, at this moment, bang, 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 following a huge rumbling sound, the entire living room trembled violently. Then, the walls of the living room facing the corridor and the living room facing the windows suddenly collapsed, raising a lot of stone chips and dust. Among the stone chips and dust, the silhouettes of several large creatures that stepped on the collapsed walls could be clearly seen. In addition, there were also large creatures that entered the living room from the two windows and the living room door. Some of them were covered in yellow scales, like a large piece of moving stone. Some of them were slender, covered in purple spots, and their sharp claws flickered with a dim light. Some of them had two horns that were as sharp as scimitars on their heads. At this moment, all of them were baring their teeth, locking onto the four assassins and pouncing on them together. It was the 9 blood fiends and the middle-aged man who had arrived. Blood fiends? Why are there so many blood fiends? Damn it, what's going on? The 9 blood fiends were too large, almost filling up the entire living room. The 4 assassins were surrounded in the middle, and there was no space to escape or hide. One of the assassins panicked and had his heart pierced by a long spear. Another assassin was pressed to the ground. He struggled with all his might, but he couldn't break free at all. In the end, he was killed by a scimitar-like blade. One of the assassins was sent flying by a large beast. After falling to the ground, he vomited blood nonstop. Finally, the middle-aged man finished him off with a spear. One of the assassins was stabbed in the heart by a horn, and his eyes were wide open as he fell to the ground. In just a short moment, all 4 assassins were dead. Originally, with the strength of the 4 ferocious blood warriors, they shouldn't have been defeated so quickly by the 9 blood fiends and the middle-aged man, who were slightly weakened. Chapter 177. What exactly is going on? Looking at the 9 blood fiends and the middle-aged man gathered in the living room, as well as the corpses of the 4 assassins on the floor. Everyone from the Fergus family other than Gray had expressions of shock and fear at the same time. They were shocked that the 4 assassins had been killed so easily, frightened by the sudden appearance of the 9 blood fiends and the middle-aged man's attitude towards the Fergus family. What if they were here to exterminate the Fergus family as well? If the 4 assassins had died so easily, what would happen to them, who were weaker than the 4 assassins? Gray, what's going on? Even Viscount Fergus found it hard to remain calm at this moment. He looked at Gray with shock on his face. If not for Gray's reminder, he would have been trampled under the feet of one of the blood fiends. It was obvious that these 9 blood fiends were related to Gray. Father, during this trip, I also obtained a special magic weapon. Its ability is to control dead creatures. These 9 blood fiends and that person are all under my control. Originally, Gray didn't want to tell Viscount Fergus and the others about his ability to control corpses. He didn't expect to encounter an assassination attempt, so he had no choice but to summon the blood fiends. It was naturally impossible to say that this was the ability of his blood fiends, so Gray explained that it was a magical weapon with a special ability. A magical weapon that can control corpses. Hearing Gray's explanation, everyone couldn't help but widen their eyes, their faces revealing astonishment and shock. The shock on their faces was even greater than before. Just by listening to Gray's explanation of the magical weapon's ability, they could imagine how powerful this magical weapon was. They didn't expect Gray to obtain such a powerful weapon. Brother, are you a ferocious blood warrior? Gray, are you a ferocious blood warrior? Moments later, everyone recovered from their shock. Finally, someone recalled the strength that Gray had displayed in the battle with the assassins. They couldn't be blamed for reacting slowly. It was just that the shock they received just now was too great. First, it was the sudden appearance of the 9 blood fiends. Then, the 4 assassins who had almost taken their lives were killed in a matter of seconds. Finally, it was said that Gray possessed a special magic weapon that could control corpses. Every piece of news was as shocking as Gray's display of the ferocious blood warrior's strength. Yes, Gray nodded in agreement. After getting confirmation from Gray, Sarah hugged Gray's arm with all her strength in surprise. Caroline covered her mouth in surprise. Elise was dumbfounded. Madame de Milan's eyes were filled with fear. At this moment, she really couldn't think of going against Gray. Lord Viscount, a large number of footsteps approached. Lord Linda had rushed over with his guards, but when they saw the 9 blood fiends, their expressions changed. They stood far away, not daring to approach. Although the 9 blood fiends were standing quietly in the living room and had no intention of attacking them, blood fiends were still blood fiends. How could they not be afraid? Linda, what's the situation outside? Viscount Fergus asked. Of course, he had heard the fight outside. There was an assassin outside, but he was killed by these blood fiends. At this point, he couldn't help but look at the 9 blood fiends in shock. His eyes were filled with horror. The strength of the assassin outside was obvious to all. Just one person was able to block the path of over 100 people. Almost every moment, a guard was killed by him. Even he had almost died under his opponent's blade. And yet, such a person was easily killed by these blood fiends that had suddenly barged into the castle. One could only imagine how powerful these blood fiends were. Move the bodies of these 4 away. You can leave now. Pass down the order. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Otherwise, they will be executed immediately. Viscount Fergus thought for a moment and coldly ordered. Yes, Lord Viscount. Lord Linda hurriedly nodded and left with his guards. He could tell that these blood fiends were definitely related to the Fergus family. According to his estimation, these blood fiends were very likely the hidden strength of the Fergus family. They were only forced to reveal themselves after encountering the assassin. Gray, can these 5 assassins be controlled by the magic weapon? Viscount Fergus asked after making sure that Lord Linda and his guards had carried the 4 corpses far away. Yes, as long as their heads aren't damaged. But it'll take some time, so we'll need to find a quiet room. Gray nodded. All right, I'll have someone arrange it later. Viscount Fergus didn't say anything about handing over the magic weapon that could control corpses. A magic weapon that could control corpses and display unimaginable power. Even if it fell into his hands, he wouldn't hand it over. Naturally, Gray was the same. Moreover, this magic weapon could also be used by the Fergus family if it was in Gray's hands. What was the difference between it being in the hands of the Fergus family? After comforting Sarah, who was seeing dead people for the first time, Gray went to the room where the 5 Shadow Serpent assassins' corpses were piled. After closing the door, He used his ability to control corpses and controlled the 5 corpses. Because he had already planned to control the 5 corpses, Gray didn't attack their heads when he controlled the blood fiends to attack. Even the wounds on their bodies weren't serious except for the fatal ones. After doing all this, he went to the study. "You're here." In the study, Viscount Fergus and Bernal were both present. Viscount Fergus nodded to Gray when he saw Gray enter. Gray closed the door and said, "Father, I've already checked. Father, I've already checked. These people all have black snake tattoos on their arms. They are indeed members of the Shadow Serpent. It's really them." Viscount Fergus's expression was grave. If it wasn't for Gray suddenly taking out the magic weapon that could control corpses, the entire Fergus family would have been destroyed. "Father, I feel that this assassination didn't come at a normal time." Bernal frowned. Although the Shadow Serpent escaped last time, they also suffered heavy losses. It's reasonable to say that they shouldn't dare to make a move against the Sydney territory in a short period of time. Could it be that the matter of us telling the Sydney family has been exposed? Gray slightly raised his eyebrows. He also felt that this matter wasn't normal. It's possible. Viscount Fergus's eyes showed that he was deep in thought. Whether it's because the matter of us telling the secret has been exposed or not, we should be able to find out tomorrow if other noble families have been assassinated. The next day, in the Rock family study. "What's the situation with the Fergus family now?" Viscount Rock asked. "It's confirmed that the Fergus family was assassinated last night. However, the informant we infiltrated into the Fergus family castle was killed last night. We don't know the specific situation." Viscount Rock's eldest son, Alfred, replied. "However, according to the information obtained from external sources, it seems that only Viscount Fergus and Gray Fergus were injured, and it wasn't fatal. Only Emerson and Gray Fergus were injured, and it wasn't fatal." Hearing this news, the pen in Viscount Rock's hand snapped with a crack. He, who usually didn't show his emotions, showed a rare expression of annoyance on his face. "Useless, simply useless. I spent so much effort to send the news to them, and they can't even destroy a Viscount's family. Such a large assassination organization. Isn't it a little too useless? Is it because of the last incident that they lost too much strength?" Just as the two were talking in the study, a young servant passed by the study not far away. He looked around, and after confirming that there was no one around, he couldn't help but tiptoe closer to the door of the study and listen slightly. Chapter 178. What? The Fergus family will be assassinated by the Shadow Serpent again because of the Rock family? Bernal's face was full of anger when he heard the news from Viscount Fergus. His eyes were about to spit fire. Although the Fergus family had safely survived the assassination attempt this time, only those who had experienced it knew the dangers involved. If it weren't for Gray's magic weapon with the ability to control corpses, the entire Fergus family would have been wiped out. Now that she heard that all of this was caused by the Rock family, one could imagine her anger at this time. Damn it, the Rock family! He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists until they made cracking sounds. Gray, who heard this news, couldn't help but reveal a cold expression as his body revealed an icy killing intent. "Father, is this news accurate?" Gray took a deep breath and suppressed his boiling, killing intent as he asked. "It was the spies we infiltrated into the Rock family found out. The news is absolutely reliable." Viscount Fergus's eyes were also cold. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Gray as if he had made a decision. "Gray, how is the combat strength of the corpses under your control? They can't use the ability of blood fiends, nor can they use the power of blood. Their combat strength isn't as good as the ferocious blood warriors, but it's a lot better than the high-rank blood warriors." Gray answered and then asked thoughtfully, "Father, don't tell me you want to—" "Yes." Viscount Fergus nodded directly, his eyes flashing with an icy, killing intent. Since the Shadow Serpent has already made a move against the Fergus family, then it's not surprising that the Shadow Serpent would also make a move against the Rock family. In the evening at the Rock family restaurant, "Father, I heard that the Fergus family was assassinated last night. Is this true?" Viscount Locke's second son, Maury Locke, asked. "Yes, they were indeed assassinated. The assassins were from the Shadow Serpent." Viscount Fergus and Grey Fergus both suffered some injuries. Viscount Locke nodded. Isn't the Fergus family very arrogant? You finally learned your lesson. Hearing that the Fergus family had been assassinated and that someone had been injured, Morley Locke couldn't help but be overjoyed. However, it quickly turned into slight regret. The Shadow Serpent is really something. Why didn't they exterminate the Fergus family? Even if they can't exterminate the Fergus family, killing the guy would be good. The guy he was talking about was Grey. The current Grey had almost become his nightmare. After being defeated by Grey in the Viscount's clan battle, he learned from the painful experience and worked hard to cultivate. He wanted to defeat Grey and wash away his previous humiliation. However, just 2 months ago, he had suddenly heard that Grey was already an upper-level blood warrior. In an instant, he had lost all motivation, only a deep sense of fear. When the other party was still a middle-rank blood warrior, he was already no match for him. Now that the other party was already a high-rank blood warrior, how could he possibly be a match for him? Moreover, why was the other party's cultivation speed so fast? He had always been praised as a genius and was proud of it. However, compared to the other party, his talent was not just a little bit inferior. This made him really unwilling to accept it. His heart was filled with resentment. Why was the other party's talent better than his? Hearing the words of his second son, Morley Locke, Viscount Locke's face was also gloomy. He really couldn't understand why the Shadow Serpent's assassination had failed. Logically speaking, with the strength of the Fergus family, they only needed to send 3 murderous great assassins to exterminate the Fergus family. In the previous encirclement, although the Shadow Serpent had suffered heavy losses, it shouldn't be to the extent that they couldn't even send 3 murderous great assassins. After all, the Shadow Serpent wasn't an ordinary small organization. Moreover, how could an organization that could challenge the Marquis family be small? However, under such circumstances, the Shadow Serpent had actually failed. This made him feel that there was something strange about it. The Fergus family had issued a gag order regarding the assassination, and the spy they had planted in the Fergus family had also died in last night's assassination. As a result, he had no way of knowing the specific process of last night's battle, and was also unable to determine what had caused the Shadow Serpent's assassination to fail. They're lucky. Snorting coldly in his heart, Viscount Locke restrained the coldness on his face and once again returned to his usual calm and collected self. However, there were still dark clouds in his eyes that couldn't be erased. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, suddenly, from the window of the dining room, 6 masked figures dressed in black suddenly rushed in from the entrance of the dining room. Then, they all held weapons in their hands and rushed towards the Rock family in the dining room. Not good. The sudden change caused Viscount Locke's expression to change greatly. He quickly rushed towards the place where the weapons were hidden. However, Aylford Locke and Morley Locke's reactions were half a beat slower than his. After they reacted, they also stood up and rushed towards the place where the weapons were hidden. However, before the two of them could reach the place where the weapons were hidden, 2 assassins had already rushed in front of them. Poof, poof. The pitch-black blade was like a flash of black light as it swept across the 2 men's necks. Bright red blood spurted out like a fountain. It dyed the dining room floor that had been dragged clean. The 2 men's eyes were wide open as their bodies collapsed weakly. It wasn't just the 2 of them. The middle-aged woman couldn't escape either. She was beheaded almost at the same time as the 2 of them. Aylford, Morley, Horace. Just as he took the weapons in his hands, he turned around and saw his 2 sons and wife lying weakly on the ground. Viscount Locke's eyes were bloodshot, and he was about to go crazy. He had participated in assassinations several times and had seen the targets of the assassination roar angrily because of the death of their loved ones. At that time, there was not the slightest ripple in his heart. To him, killing people was no different from killing livestock. However, at this moment, his own family had become the target of an assassination. His own loved ones had fallen under the blade of the enemy. He finally understood what it was like. It was heart-wrenching pain. Go to hell. He roared angrily and rushed madly towards the assassins who had killed his loved ones. However, he was immediately blocked by 3 people. Clang, clang, clang. As soon as they exchanged blows, His face immediately became aghast. The three people besieging him were actually ferocious blood warriors. Puff, puff. After a few exchanges, several deep wounds appeared on his body. Blood dripped from his body, and puddles of blood appeared on the ground. He tried his best to resist, but he was getting weaker and weaker. His blood fiend's ability was to control plants. He could only use it in places with plants. He couldn't use it in the living room. Poochie. Finally, a long sword suddenly broke through his blockade and pierced his chest. Goo goo. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with intense unwillingness as he slowly collapsed weakly. Other than the dining room, there were also battles happening in other places in the castle. Hearing the sounds of fighting in the dining room, the castle guards rushed towards the dining room. However, their path was blocked by two men in black. More than 100 castle guards rushed towards the two men like a tide, but they couldn't break through their blockade. Not only that, the two men were like killing machines, killing the guards one by one. The leader of these guards was a middle-aged man in brown battle armor. He was the guard commander of Lock Castle and had the strength of an upper-level blood warrior. However, he was already injured from the first exchange of blows with these two assassins. Fortunately, he retreated in time to save his life. Shadow snakes, you are the shadow snakes. With the help of the slightly dim light in the castle, he suddenly saw a pitch-black venomous snake tattoo on the left side of one of the assassin's sleeves that had been cut. His expression immediately changed as he screamed in horror. Faced with his terrified shout, the two assassins were not affected at all. They continued to kill the castle guards mercilessly. There were fewer and fewer castle guards alive. Many of them were so frightened that they turned around and fled. Just as he thought that today was going to be a bad day, he realized that the two assassins suddenly turned around and rushed towards the castle wall. They flipped over the wall and jumped out of the castle. What's going on? Not good, Lord Viscount. After surviving a disaster, he was full of doubts. Why did the two assassins suddenly retreat? However, he immediately reacted. His expression changed as he hurriedly ran towards the dining hall. He had a bad premonition in his heart. Lord Viscount, young Master Alfred, young Master Mori. Sure enough, when he arrived at the dining hall, the bad premonition in his heart came true. The dining hall was in ruins. It was obvious that a fight had taken place. At this moment, Viscount Locke and the other three were all lying in a pool of blood, their eyes wide open in unwillingness. It's over, he muttered, his eyes blank. He didn't know what to do. For nobles like him who had been infected by the Rock family, the Rock family was everything. Once the Rock family was destroyed, the enfeoffment they had received before would also be taken back. In other words, from now on, he and his family were a commoner family. The efforts of several generations had vanished like smoke. How could he not be at a loss? A few hours later, in the Fergus family, the Rock family really has a lot of good things. Looking at the box of magic coins, a box of jewelry, and many other valuable things in front of him, Bernal was slightly surprised. The ones who participated in the assassination this time were Viscount Fergus, Grey, and the 6 ferocious blood warriors controlled by Grey. His strength wasn't enough to participate in such an assassination, so he didn't follow. It's indeed quite a lot. Grey also sighed slightly. After killing Viscount Locke, he and Viscount Fergus searched Locke's castle and found a secret room. They took everything that could be easily taken away and wouldn't be recognized. These things added up were more than the previous encirclement of the Oliver family. And this was only the things that couldn't be recognized and were easy to take away. There were many other things that they didn't take away because they were too obvious. It could be seen that the Rock family had accumulated a lot of wealth. The news of the Fergus family being assassinated has been reported to the Sidney family this morning. The Sidney family should send people over tomorrow. Those 5 assassins must be hidden well. Viscount Fergus looked at Grey and cautiously instructed. I know. Chapter 179. The Rock family was also assassinated. All the direct descendants of the Rock family were killed. The Rock family has been exterminated. It was the Shadow Serpent. I heard that the guards who survived the battle said that they saw the symbol of the Shadow Serpent on one of the assassins' arms. The next day, after the Fergus family was assassinated, The news of the Rock family's extermination quickly spread. The families who heard the news couldn't help but change their expressions. They all increased the security of their castles, and some families even secretly hid their direct descendants. For a moment, the atmosphere in Sydney Marquee Hill was tense. It wasn't any less tense than the last time the Shadow Serpent attacked. The Fergus family, who caused this tense atmosphere, welcomed the people sent by the Sydney family for support and investigation. Young Master Zaloyan, Count Smalley, thank you for your trouble. This time, the Sydney family sent the next successor of the Sydney family, Zaloyan, to investigate and kill the Shadow Serpent. Count Smalley was also in the team. It's fine. Zaloyan shook his head, but his expression was slightly gloomy. It seems that the lesson given to the Shadow Serpent last time wasn't enough. They actually dared to sneak into Sydney Marquee again. On the way here, he suddenly heard that the Rock family had been exterminated. It could be said that he was extremely shocked and furious. It's a pity for the Rock family. Viscount Fergus sighed slightly with a cat-shedding mentality. In less than a year, they attacked Sydney Marquee twice in a row. This matter won't be settled just like that. Zaloyan gritted his teeth. Won't be settled just like that? Viscount Fergus's eyes flashed with surprise, and he couldn't help but ask carefully, Young Master Zaloyan, is the Marquis preparing to find the Shadow Serpent's lair and completely exterminate it? Yes, that's the plan. The family spies are currently investigating the Shadow Serpent's lair. Zaloyan nodded and then said, Oh, right. By the way, have you found any news about the Shadow Serpent? No, the territory has been searched, but we couldn't find any trace of the Shadow Serpent. I'm afraid that after the last assassination, he has already withdrawn from the territory. Viscount Fergus frowned and shook his head. After learning about the assassination from the Fergus family and obtaining the battle process that had been embellished by the Fergus family, Soroyan and the others hurriedly set off again for Lock Castle without spending the night with the Fergus family. Obviously, they were in a hurry to investigate the Rock family. After all, the situation there was more serious than the Fergus family. Somewhere in the kingdom, the 4 core members of Shadow Snake were sitting. My lord, I'm very sorry. The assassination failed. The woman with the eye patch lowered her head and apologized. I already know about this news. What's the specific situation? How are the casualties? The sinister-looking old man nodded and asked. This time, we sent out a total of 5 murderous great assassins. We have lost contact with all of them. My guess is that they have all been killed. The woman with the eye patch reported. We lost contact with all 5 murderous great assassins. Opposite her, the purple-haired man raised his eyebrows and frowned. The Fergus family shouldn't have this kind of ability. It seems that the news was indeed a scheme of the Sydney family. But something strange happened. The woman with the eye patch continued. What strange thing? The sinister-looking old man asked. The day after we assassinated the Fergus family, in the Sydney territory, a Viscount family with the surname Locke was also assassinated. All the direct descendants of this family were killed. There are rumors that it was done by us, Shadow Snake. However, I didn't order such a fate, and I didn't send anyone else. It should be a force that used the name of Shadow Snake to make a move. The purple-haired man guessed. In the last assassination, a noble family under the Oliver family was also killed like this. It's just that we don't know if it was done by the same force. Now, the Sydney family must be sure that it was done by us, Shadow Snake. The short-haired man frowned. Damn it. How dare they make Shadow Snake the scapegoat? Don't let me know which force it is. The woman with the eye patch said with hatred. Ahem. The sinister-looking old man coughed twice and attracted the attention of the 3 people. Since it's confirmed that it was a scheme of the Sydney family, then the assassination of the Fergus family will be postponed. Yes, sir. The purple-haired man, the short-haired man, and the woman with the eye patch all responded respectfully. After a round of investigation, with the cooperation of all the nobles of Sydney, they almost turned the entire Marquis, Sydney, upside down, but they still couldn't find any trace of Shadow Snake. In the end, they could only conclude that Shadow Snake had already left the Marquis Sydney, and the hunting team led by Zaloyan could only disband. A few months later, in a Whitestone training field of Fergus Castle, Bernal, and the others were training here, and Gray rarely appeared here. "Brother, what do you think of my training?" Because she had just finished training, Sarah's face was bright red and her forehead was covered in sweat. She looked at Gray with anticipation. She was now 15 years old. On the day she turned 15, Viscount Fergus had implanted the Wind Wolf bloodline in her. As for the cultivation of her blood technique, it was Gray who taught her. Not bad. You've improved a lot." Gray was not stingy with his praise. "Yay." Hearing Gray's praise, Sarah's face suddenly bloomed with joy. She happily said, "I'm going to take a shower." After that, she skipped and ran to the bathroom. Looking at her leaving figure, Gray smiled. He said that she had improved a lot, and this was not a lie. Sarah's cultivation talent was slightly weaker than the original owner of the body, but slightly stronger than Bernal and the others. He didn't know if it was because they were born from the same father and mother that they both inherited better cultivation talent. Your talent is so good, and Sarah's cultivation talent is also so good. What a blow. Bernal, who had just finished his training, came over and sighed slightly. Gray laughed dryly. At this time, he didn't want to rub salt in the wound, so he quickly changed the topic. "Congratulations, Brother Bernal. I heard from my father that you are engaged to Miss Bernice." "Thank you," Bernal said with a happy smile on his face. "What about you? You've attended a lot of banquets in the past few months. Is there a girl you like?" "Me? It's still early." Gray rolled his eyes. Although he has the soul of an adult in his 20s, this body is still very young. The coming-of-age ceremony has been held. It's not early anymore. You don't know, but there are already a lot of noble families that have conveyed their intentions to father. Bernal said with a smile. Right, a few days ago, Baron Clive seemed to have looked for father because of this. Carolyn walked over and teased him, something she rarely did. Gray's face changed, and his mood instantly became bad. "Who told you to be so popular?" Seeing Gray's face change, Bernal shrugged. "It's not good to be too popular. Look, I just held the coming-of-age ceremony, and I'm already being targeted." "Indeed, it's not good to be too popular," Caroline said in agreement after carefully sizing up Gray. In the midst of Bernal and Caroline's banter, Grimm left the white stone gymnasium in a slightly sorry state. As for the engagement or marriage, he really did not think about it now. He originally thought that it was still early. After all, he had just come of age. He did not expect that he was already being targeted. Shaking his head, he did not want to think about this for now. He returned to his bedroom, and his gaze involuntarily fell on a small bronze bottle placed on the coffee table compartment. The small bottle contained the blood of the steel-armed ape that he had hunted before. Should I choose the steel-armed ape? A few months had passed, and with the current strength of his body, he should be able to consume the blood of a blood beast again. As for the choice of blood beast this time, he was a little hesitant. Before his strength reached the level of a ferocious blood warrior, he did not have the ability to hunt blood beasts. It was very difficult to obtain blood beast blood, so every blood beast blood was extremely precious to him. As long as he encountered one, he naturally would not miss it. But now he already had the ability to hunt blood beasts, and he already had the ability to choose. In addition, blood beast blood could not be consumed continuously. Therefore, every time he consumed a blood beast blood, he had to carefully consider and strive to choose the one that was most suitable for him. Now, he was considering whether to consume the blood of the steel-armed ape. In the end, the hesitation in his eyes was replaced by determination. He picked up the bottle of blood and walked to the bathroom. The defense of the steel-armed ape's arm was even stronger than that of the ferocious-level blood beasts, the iron-armored rhinoceros, which had the strongest defense among the ferocious-level blood beasts. Not to mention a ferocious-level blood beast, even a ferocious-level blood beast would find it difficult to injure it. In terms of practicality, it should be above the iron-armored rhinoceros. Chapter 180. Goo-goo. Lying in the bathtub filled with hot water, Gray unscrewed the cap of the small bronze bottle and drank it all in one go. The blood from the steel-armed ape was like a catalyst. Once it entered Gray's body, it immediately caused a drastic change. A scalding heat rose from Gray's stomach, and spread throughout his body. Waves of numbness spread throughout his body. This was a feeling that he had experienced many times. Gray's entire body was crimson red. His entire body was burning hot, and his consciousness gradually became blurry. After an unknown amount of time, when the water in the bathtub had turned cold, Gray gradually woke up. After waking up, he immediately felt a wave of fatigue in his heart. Every muscle in his body was incomparably sore, transmitting the message of fatigue to him. After resting for a while, he finished bathing, put on his clothes, and walked out of the bathroom. His body was extremely weak. Now, he only wanted to have a good sleep. After sleeping until the afternoon, Gray's physical strength had recovered quite a bit. Although he was still a little tired, it was no longer a big problem. He decided to test the specific effects of the steel-armed ape's iron arms on his body. This was extremely necessary. After all, if he did not have a thorough understanding of his own ability, he would not be able to use it reasonably in battle. After leaving the castle, he came to the forest that he had set as one of the training grounds. Behind him, a man with a medium build followed closely. In order to deal with the possible assassination of the Shadow Serpent and protect the castle's safety, all the blood fiends and people controlled by the ability to control corpses were placed in the basement of the castle by Gray. If the castle was attacked, they would be able to rush over immediately. Moreover, there was another advantage. The basement of the castle had a passageway that led to the outside of the castle. Usually, when he was preparing to use the blood fiends, he could secretly bring them out of the castle from here without causing too much of a commotion. After all, 9 blood fiends entering and leaving the castle was too conspicuous. Bang, bang, bang. After entering the forest, Gray punched the nearest few trees. Kacha, kacha, kacha. Under his fists, the thinnest trees that were as thick as buckets were easily smashed by him. However, he did not feel the slightest bit of pain. With regard to this phenomenon, he was already used to it. After all, before consuming the steel-armed ape's blood, he, who possessed the shadow snake's defensive characteristic, was already able to reach this level. The reason why he was doing this now was just to move his body a little and warm it up. After moving his body, Gray rolled up his left sleeve and held it diagonally in front of him. His gaze was cautious as he looked at the middle-sized man opposite him. Use 10% of your strength to attack my arm, he ordered the man of medium build. Following his order, the man with a medium build who had been standing there in a daze suddenly seemed to come alive. The long spear in his hand was like the spitting of a poisonous snake, swiftly thrusting out. Whoosh! The long spear pierced through the air and pierced Gray's arm. Ding! After a piercing sound that sounded like metal colliding, the man withdrew his spear and stood aside. Gray looked at his arm where the spear had pierced him, unscathed. He couldn't see any damage at all, not even a scratch. Moreover, during the collision, he did not feel any pain at all. 20% of my strength. Raising his arm, Gray continued to give orders to the man of medium build. Ding! The long spear swiftly thrusted out and once again pierced Gray's arm. Once again, the sound of metal colliding rang out. However, Gray's arm was still unscathed. He still did not feel any pain. 30% of my strength. Unscathed. He did not feel any pain. 40% of my strength. Unscathed. He did not feel any pain. 70% of my strength. When the spear collided, there were faint sparks. Unscathed. He did not feel any pain. He was only slightly pushed back by the force of the spear. 80% of my strength. Sparks blossomed. Unscathed. He did not feel any pain. He retreated a little more. 90% of my strength. Sparks blossomed. Unscathed. He did not feel any pain. He retreated a few big steps. 100% of my strength. Unscathed. He did not feel any pain. However, he was pushed back continuously. Just as I guessed, even the attacks of the ferocious blood warriors would not be able to injure me at all. Staring at his unscathed arm, Gray muttered to himself in satisfaction. Moreover, this is clearly not the limit of this pair of arms. I'm afraid that even a berserker would find it hard to injure this pair of arms. It's a pity that I can't find a berserker to test it out. A pair of arms that even a berserker would find it hard to injure would definitely be of great use to Gray, who was only a ferocious blood warrior. With this pair of arms, it was as if he had two indestructible shields. Moreover, it was the kind that he could carry with him at all times. One could imagine that a person who carried two indestructible shields at all times would have a strong ability to protect himself and survive. How could he not be strong? Moreover, the use of this pair of arms was not only reflected in defense. In battle, it could also provide him with great assistance. This pair of arms was also two hidden weapons. When used at a crucial moment, it could definitely deal a fatal blow to the enemy. Not to mention others just a few months ago when he fought with the Shadow Serpent assassins. If the him at that time already had this pair of arms, he was even confident that he could get rid of those two Shadow Serpent assassins without relying on the corpse control ability. Not bad at all. Extremely satisfied with the results of the test, Gray brought the man with a medium build back to the castle. At the same time, a decision had already formed in his heart. It's time to increase the number of blood fiends. Originally, Gray already had this idea a few months ago when he had just returned to Fergus Castle. However, the sudden attack from the Shadow Serpent forced him to put this plan on hold. From the information obtained from the Rock family's spy, it was certain that the Fergus family had been targeted by the Shadow Serpent. Although they had withstood the first wave of assassinations from the Shadow Serpent, there would definitely be more to come. Under such circumstances, how could he be at ease and leave? He didn't want to return as a loner after going out for a while. Now that a few months had passed, the Shadow Serpent's follow-up assassinations still hadn't come. It was obvious that the other party had temporarily given up on assassinating the Fergus family for some reason. Although he wasn't clear on the reason behind this, it was obvious that if he left temporarily, the castle shouldn't encounter any danger. Therefore, he decided to carry out his previous plan. The next day, after finishing his morning training, Gray went to the basement. In the basement, there were 9 blood fiends, the man with a medium build, and 5 assassins from the Shadow Serpent. Because of their existence, the huge basement seemed to be slightly crowded. Gray went to one of the walls of the basement and activated a rune mechanism. A slanted passageway appeared. He walked down the passageway. Behind him, the 9 blood fiends, the man with a medium build, and the 5 assassins from the Shadow Serpent followed. Fortunately, the constructed passageway was relatively large. The 9 blood fiends walked one by one, barely able to pass through it. Following the passageway, after 7 or 8 twists and turns, they reached the end of the passageway. At the end of the passageway, there were stairs leading upwards. At the end of the stairs, a stone door appeared, blocking the way. He found a rune mechanism on the stone wall beside it and activated it. The door slid open and a trace of light appeared in front of Gray's eyes. Gray walked down the stairs. What entered his eyes was a field of verdant green. From time to time, he could hear the chirping of birds. He appeared in a forest. Because the door could only be opened and closed from the inside, Gray found some weeds and dead wood to block the entrance. Then, he walked towards the Scarlet Leaves forest. As for Viscount Fergus, he had already informed him. Chapter 181. In the depths of the Red Leaf Forest, surrounded by 9 blood fiends, a middle-sized man, and 5 assassins from the Snake of Shadows, Gray stepped on the withered leaves and walked forward without hiding his tracks. He was not here to avoid the blood fiends, but to find them. Naturally, he did not need to hide his tracks. It was better to make a big commotion so that the surrounding blood fiends would be attracted. Howl! The effect was immediate. More than 10 minutes later, a roar of anger and warning suddenly rang out. Then the trees in the distance shook violently and even collapsed. A huge creature was walking toward them. It was a huge blood fiend in the shape of a bear. Its body was 5 meters long and covered in yellow fur. Its 2 forelimbs stood upright, and its huge paws were as big as palm leaf fans. Its black claws shone with a dark light. The bear opened its mouth, revealing its white teeth that were as sharp as daggers. Saliva dripped from its mouth. Howl! It was patrolling like a king, but when it saw the extremely exaggerated team, led by Gray, its originally unruly bear eyes clearly showed a hint of fear. However, even so, it still did not retreat. Instead, it roared and issued a warning. The reason for that was because this was its territory. However, all-powerful creatures were extremely possessive and valued their own territories. Sometimes, they would even risk their lives for the sake of their territories. Kacha, kacha! A few thick trees collapsed under its bare paw's attack. It was showing off its powerful strength to its enemies. Herculean bear, Gray muttered as he sized up the bare blood fiend in front of him. If he was not mistaken, this blood fiend in front of him should be a murderous level blood fiend called the Herculean bear that he had read about in a book. After thinking for a while, Gray did not command the blood fiends to attack the Herculean bear. Instead, he walked out of the crowd of blood fiends and walked toward the Herculean bear. This time, one of his goals in coming to the Red Leaf Forest was to expand the number of blood fiends. Another goal was to hone his combat skills. He had many blood fiends characteristics. If he wanted to effectively utilize these characteristics, he had to form a unique combat style that belonged to him. This was something that needed to be slowly explored through actual combat. Roar! Seeing Gray approaching, the Herculean bear became more and more irritated. Its eyes flashed with anger and bloodlust. If it weren't for the numerous blood fiends behind Gray, he would have pounced on the tiny Gray long ago. Finally, at some point, it could no longer endure Gray's provocation and pounced on Gray. A huge bear paw, like a huge hammer, hammered towards Gray. Under his hammering, a strong wind pressure was formed, causing the surrounding leaves to tremble. Facing the incoming bear paw that was even larger than his head, Gray did not draw his sword. Instead, he threw out a punch. He needed actual combat to test his iron fists. Boom! There was a loud boom, as if a bomb had exploded. The raging air caused the surrounding leaves to rustle. The withered leaves on the ground were swept up and fluttered in all directions. The bear paw and Gray's fist quickly separated. Smack! The Herculean bear's huge body could not help but take a few steps back before stabilizing itself. Smack, smack, smack! On the other hand, Gray's body took a few steps back. As expected of a Herculean bear, its strength is even greater than Hanhu's. Gray stomped hard on the ground and forcibly stabilized himself. He was slightly surprised. However, the next moment, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He looked at the Herculean bear's paw that had been hit by his fist. There was a dark red mark in the middle of the giant bear's paw. Drops of blood dripped onto the withered leaves. The Herculean bear was injured. The Herculean bear was injured in the first exchange. Although the injury was not serious, it was enough to show the strength of Gray's iron fists. Roar! The injured Herculean bear let out an extremely angry and bloodthirsty roar. There was a rumbling sound as it stomped on the ground. As the ground trembled, it pounced towards Gray and slammed its paw down. Bang! With a dull thud, the huge Herculean bear was sent flying. It smashed heavily onto the ground, creating a loud sound that sounded like gold and jade being overturned. Before the Herculean bear's paw landed, Gray had already appeared in front of the Herculean bear and punched it in the chest. He had used the speed of the wind wolf, and the clumsy Herculean bear could not react at all. Dark red blood stains appeared on the Herculean bear's chest, dyeing its yellow fur red. The Herculean bear got up angrily, but the next moment it was sent flying again. Crack! Several trees were directly smashed by the Herculean bear. Bang, bang, bang. In front of Gray's speed, the clumsy Herculean bear was punched repeatedly by Gray, and its injuries were not light. Roar! After being hit repeatedly, the Herculean bear saw Gray rushing towards it again and let out an extremely angry roar. Then, in the next moment, an invisible ripple spread out from it. Bang! Gray, who was running towards the Herculean bear, suddenly felt his body sink. It was as if there was a boulder weighing thousands of kilograms on his body, and the ground under his feet could not bear the weight and sank down a few centimeters. Whoosh! At this moment, the Herculean bear's huge paw slammed towards Gray. Bang! Gray was slapped backwards, and there were 2 straight scratches on the ground beneath his feet. Gravity field? Although he was hit by the Herculean bear's paw, due to its surprise attack. Gray's expression did not change at all. Instead, he looked interested. He was not injured. Before the Herculean bear's paw slammed down, he used his two arms to block in front of him and blocked the Herculean bear's attack without any damage. He did not even feel the slightest pain. Just as he had expected, his arms were an indestructible shield at the crucial moment. It was like this just now. This is the gravity field mentioned in the books. Lifting his legs, Gray found that his whole body was unusually heavy, as if it was filled with lead. He did not doubt that his current movement speed was not even comparable to the Herculean bear's. A very good ability, very effective against speed opponents. Gray judged in his heart. Howl! At this moment, accompanied by a rumbling sound, the Herculean bear's eyes were full of hostility, and it charged towards him again. Facing the Herculean bear, Gray's expression was calm. His speed was limited, and his strength was weaker than the Herculean bear's. However, this did not mean that Gray did not have a way to deal with the Herculean bear. The Herculean bear had already used its blood beast ability, but he had not. Huff! He growled and used his blood beast ability, Ice Windblade. Whoosh! A sparkling and translucent wind blade appeared. In an instant, it was close to the Herculean bear, and before the Herculean bear could react, it had already slashed its body. Poof! The Herculean bear that was charging towards Gray was sent flying backwards. On its chest, a clear bloody wound appeared. At the same time, an ice-cold aura was spreading through its body, freezing it. Whoosh! As the Herculean bear was sent flying by the ice wind blade, the gravity field that the Herculean bear had used was lifted. Gray rushed out, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of the frozen Herculean bear, which could only move with difficulty. Poof! He pulled out the magic sword, which was surrounded by lightning, and pierced the Herculean bear's heart while it was struggling angrily. He broke the ice, collected the blood, and used his ability to control corpses. More than half an hour later, the Herculean bear, with a clear wound on its chest, slowly got up and joined the army of blood beasts behind Gray. It's a pity that the blood beasts are controlled by the ability to control corpses. The blood beast ability cannot be preserved. Looking at the Herculean bear that had joined the army of blood beasts, Gray felt a little regretful. The gravity field of the Herculean bear was simply the nemesis of speed opponents. If it could be preserved, it would be extremely useful in battle. Should I choose the gravity field as my next ability? Gray could not help but consider if he should use the Herculean bear's blood the next time he consumed blood beasts to obtain the gravity field. It's still too early to consider this. However, in the end, Gray did not make a decision. He had just consumed the steel-armed ape's blood, and the next time he could consume it would be at least a few months later. There was no need to make a decision so early. Moreover, the Herculean bear was only the first blood beast he had hunted after entering the Scarlet Night Forest. Among the blood beasts he hunted after that, would there be any more unique and powerful abilities? Chapter 182. After controlling the Herculean ape, Gray continued his search. Soon, another blood fiend appeared in front of Gray. It was a 3-meter-long blood fiend with 8 legs and brown scales all over its body. There were 2 huge pincers at the front of its body. Its tail was very long, almost a meter long. It was segmented and had sharp needle-like objects at the end that emitted a dim light. What kind of blood fiend is this? Gray stared at the blood fiend for a while, but he couldn't recognize it. There were many types of blood fiends. Even though he had read many books about blood fiends, his understanding of them was very limited. It was normal that he could not recognize it. Whoosh! Gray rushed toward the brown-scaled blood fiend. Because he could not recognize what kind of blood fiend it was, he did not know its abilities. However, there was no reason to retreat, just because he did not know his opponent and his trump card. There would be many opponents whose abilities he did not know in the future, especially blood warriors. If he did not fight them and did not see them use their abilities, he would not know what kind of blood technique they practiced. He needed to get used to fighting without knowing his opponent's abilities. Crack! Facing Gray, the brown-scale blood fiend stretched out its thick pincers and attacked Gray. The pincers were extremely sharp. Gray did not doubt that they could break steel. Looking at the thick and textured carapace on the surface, the pincers should be quite sturdy. Whoosh! Gray leaned slightly to avoid the front of the pincers, and then punched the side of the pincers. Boom! The pincers were as sturdy as expected. Even under Gray's fist, only a few inconspicuous dents could be seen on them. However, the huge force still dragged the brown-scaled blood fiend and sent it flying. Whoosh! Gray quickly went to the side of the brown-scaled blood fiend that was sent flying. Whoosh! However, at this moment, the huge tail behind the brown-scaled blood fiend suddenly pierced toward Gray like a javelin. It was so fast that there was a strong wind in the air. Clang! Gray punched out and smashed away the sharp tail with a needle-like object at the end. Then he stomped hard on the ground and jumped several meters away, landing directly on the back of the brown-scaled blood beast. He pulled out his magic sword and quickly stabbed at the back of the brown-scaled blood beast. Puff! The magic sword surrounded by lightning stabbed down, but it stabbed into the soil. Because of the lightning, the soil was charred black, but the brown-scaled blood beast had already disappeared before he could stab it. Earth escape. Standing in place, Gray raised his eyebrows. In that instant, the blood fiend was like water that could blend into the soil. It did not encounter any resistance, as it completely blended into the soil. Clearly, this was an ability similar to Earth escape. Gray was on high alert. His infrared perception didn't have the ability to see through things, so he couldn't sense the brown-scaled blood fiend in the soil. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a long tail with an extremely sharp tip pierced out from the ground to the side, stabbing towards Gray. There, the soil slightly arched, and a vague outline appeared. It should be the body of the brown-scaled blood beast. Clang! Gray raised his arm and punched the tail of the brown-scaled blood beast away. Just as he was about to pounce on the brown-scaled blood beast, the latter suddenly sank into the ground again. Clang, clang, clang. The brown-scaled blood beast emerged from the soil from time to attack Gray. Sometimes it used its tail, sometimes it used its pincers, but Gray blocked it all. While blocking, Gray was also waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Clang! Finally, Gray seized the opportunity. Suddenly, his palm was like an iron pincer, grabbing the tail of the brown-scaled blood beast. Whoosh! The moment he grabbed the tail, Gray suddenly exerted his strength and directly swung the brown-scaled blood beast. Bang, bang, bang. Again and again, it was swung up and smashed on the ground. After being smashed more than 10 times, the brown-scaled blood beast seemed to be dizzy. Whoosh! Gray let go of the tail of the brown-scaled blood beast and quickly came to its back. The magic sword entwined with thunder and lightning stabbed toward the back of the beast. Puff, puff, puff. More than 10 holes appeared on the back of the beast. Thunder and lightning were channeled into the brown-scaled blood beast through the holes and raged inside. Clang! The brown-scaled blood beast's 2 big pincers and tail suddenly fell down powerlessly and no longer made any sound. Looking at the brown-scaled blood beast with more than 10 holes on its body, Gray shook his head helplessly. The brown-scaled blood beast's appearance was different from that of ordinary blood beasts. Gray could not accurately determine the location of its heart. In order to control it without damaging its brain, he could only stab it a few more times. But with this experience, he did not need to stab it blindly the next time he wanted to deal with this kind of blood beast. He collected its blood with the rune bag and controlled it with the ability to control corpses. It was worth mentioning that the blood of the brown-scaled blood beast was blue. After controlling this blood beast, it was almost noon. After eating some dry food and resting for a while, Gray continued to look for blood beasts. More than an hour later, Gray entered a valley. In the valley, he encountered the 3rd blood beast of the day. It was a blood beast with slender limbs, a strong body, a short tail, and purple hair all over its body. Its head was slightly flat and long, and there was a purple horn on the top of its head. This was also a blood beast that Gray had never seen before in books. Roar! Seeing Gray approaching, the purple-haired blood beast dug its hooves on the ground and suddenly rushed out. When it was close to Gray, it raised its 2 forelimbs high and kicked one of them toward Gray's chest. It was quite fast, almost as fast as Gray, who had the wind wolf speed characteristic. Whoosh! Facing the hoof, kicking towards him, Gray met it with a punch. Bang! The hooves collided with Gray's fist, and in the next moment, the purple-haired blood beast was sent flying. Obviously, the purple-haired blood beast was not good at strength. At least, it was not as good as Gray, who had Hanhu's strength characteristic. Roar! After being sent flying, the purple-haired blood beast got up angrily and rushed toward Gray again. Bang! The purple-haired blood beast was sent flying again by Gray. This time, it smashed into the stone wall of the valley, causing stone chips to fly everywhere. It struggled for a while, but could not get up. Whoosh! Gray drew his demonic sword and rushed toward the blood beast. Although he could kill it with his fist, it would cause too much damage. In order to kill it without leaving too much damage, the best way was to stab it through the heart. Whoosh! Gray was almost at the purple-haired blood beast. But at this moment, crackle! The sound of thunder suddenly came, but it did not come from the demonic sword in Gray's hand. Instead, it came from the purple-haired blood beast. Rings of lightning could be seen circling the horn on his head. Then, it suddenly shot out, extending countless branches of lightning toward Gray. This blood fiend's ability was lightning. Lightning speed was naturally extremely fast, and its movement speed was even faster than Gray's icy wind blades. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Gray. Gray did not even have time to dodge. Boom! With a loud bang, the lightning struck Gray. Pa pa pa! Gray retreated continuously. He retreated more than 10 steps before coming to a stop. After stopping, Gray's expression did not change much. This was because the lightning did not do anything to him other than pushing him back. No, the only thing that was affected was the left sleeve of his combat armor. It was completely charred and damaged. The moment the lightning struck, Gray raised his left arm and blocked in front of the lightning, completely blocking it. It can really block it. In the previous battle, when Gray used the Thunderbolt sword, he unexpectedly discovered that his arms did not seem to conduct electricity. Therefore, when the lightning struck, he raised his arm to block it. Although the lightning that struck him was more powerful than the lightning of the lightning magic sword, he was still able to block it, just as he had expected. I'm afraid that my arms are no different from real magical weapons. Looking at his undamaged arms, Gray thought to himself, ordinary metal weapons would conduct electricity, but magic weapons would not. This was because they had a certain attribute, and other attributes would be rejected. His arms were like that. Like other magic weapons, they were also isolated from the conductive properties of the lightning. In addition to the sturdiness of his arms, it was not an exaggeration to call them magic weapons. Even the most powerful lightning attack of the purple-haired blood beast could not do anything to Gray. There was no suspense in the battle. Soon, the purple-haired blood beast's heart was pierced by Gray. He collected its blood and controlled it. I've used up too much of my power of blood. I'm afraid I can't even use the icy wind blade once. Although he had only used the icy wind blade once, he had also used the power of blood when he moved and attacked. This caused his power of blood to be greatly depleted. Forget it. Let's call it a day. If he wanted to hunt more blood fiends, he would have to use his ability to control corpses. However, this went against his purpose of training himself. Therefore, Gray decided not to hunt for blood fiends for the time being. Therefore, he set up a tent in the valley and started a rest. Chapter 183. The next morning, Gray continued to hunt blood fiends. The fourth blood fiend he killed was the fastest blood fiend among the murderous level blood fiends, the wind-chasing leopard. After exchanging blows with it, Gray experienced firsthand the frustration of being crushed by an opponent in terms of speed. Although the wind wolf speed was considered one of the best among the murderous level blood fiends, the wind-chasing leopard speed was considered the fastest among all the blood fiends. Gray was skeptical about the evaluation of the fastest murderous level blood fiend. After all, until now, no one dared to claim that they had fully counted all the murderous level blood fiends. Since it was impossible to count all the murderous level blood fiends, the evaluation of the fastest was naturally an exaggeration. However, even though the wind-chasing leopard speed might not be the fastest among the murderous level blood fiends, it was still considered one of the fastest blood fiends among the murderous level blood fiends. It was inevitable that Gray's speed would be much slower when facing the wind-chasing leopard. Fortunately, the wind-chasing leopard's weakness was also very obvious. Other than its speed, it was useless in other aspects. Whether it was its strength or defense, it was extremely weak. The wind-chasing leopard's attack could not even break through Gray's defense. It was not only the defense of his arms that could not be broken, but also the defense of the other parts of his body. After all, even if his arms were not considered abnormal, the defense of the other parts of his body was already at the level of a shadow snake. After playing hide-and-seek with the wind-chasing leopard for a long time, Gray finally found an opportunity to grab the wind-chasing leopard's leg. He threw the wind-chasing leopard to the ground and stepped on its body. Then he stabbed the wind-chasing leopard's heart with his magic sword and finally ended its life. The battle took the longest time among the 4 blood fiends he had encountered. It was enough to show how difficult it was to deal with. The 5th blood fiend was a crocodile-type blood fiend that could turn mud into a landslide and attack its opponent. If Gray guessed correctly, this blood fiend should be the blood fiend that was implanted in the bodies of the giant crocodile mercenary regiment's captain and the short-haired man. After all, the blood fiend's abilities were almost identical. Without much effort, the blood fiends were killed. At this point, the number of blood fiends under Gray's control had reached 20. After searching for more than an hour, he encountered the 6th blood fiend. It was a huge blood fiend that was 3 meters long. Its skin was covered with black scale-like fur. It was fat, short, with short legs and a short neck. There were 2 vertically arranged horns on its head. The horns near its mouth were the longest and were as sharp as a scimitar, while the horns near its back were slightly shorter. Gray recognized this blood fiend. It was called the Iron Rhinoceros. The Iron Rhinoceros' inner armor on Gray's body was made from its skin. Just like the wind-chasing leopard, it was also rated as one of the most ferocious blood fiends. The only difference was its defense. Gray was also skeptical about this. However, there was no doubt that any blood fiend that was rated as the best would be extremely difficult to deal with. Just like the wind-seeking leopard, this iron-armored rhinoceros was also extremely difficult to deal with, perhaps even more so. Even if the icy wind blade landed on the rhinoceros' body, it would only cause ordinary injuries. It would probably be difficult to kill it even if he were to continuously slash it a dozen times. Naturally, Gray could not continuously use icy wind blades more than a dozen times. He did not have a large reserve of blood energy. In a day, he could only use icy wind blades 3 times. Left with no choice, he could only let the blood fiends fight together for the first time. With the Herculean ape as the lead and the other blood fiends that were also famous for their strength, the iron-armored rhinoceros was flipped over and pinned to the ground. It could not move at all. On the other hand, Gray continuously stabbed the rhinoceros' heart with his sword. Gray did not know how many times he had stabbed the rhinoceros before it finally pierced through its tough black fur and heart, ending its life. The rhinoceros was definitely the most difficult to deal with among the 6 blood fiends. It wasn't easy. Looking at the iron-armored rhinoceros with a sword in its heart, Gray wiped the sweat off his forehead and sighed. Although Gray was not afraid of encountering this iron-armored rhinoceros alone, it would be really difficult to kill it. The rhinoceros' body and leather defense were not as good as the iron arms ape's arms. However, among the murderous-level blood fiends, it was difficult to find one with a comparable defense. It was no wonder that the iron-armored rhinoceros had the best defense among the murderous-level blood fiends. It's simply the best material for a meat shield. Gray could already imagine how much stronger the defense of his blood fiends would be when this super meat shield joined his army. He collected blood and used his ability to control corpses. A black ball of flesh with tentacles trembled as it crawled into the rhinoceros' mouth. Gray stared at it without blinking. He was really a little afraid that this iron-armored rhinoceros skin was too thick for the ball of flesh to drill into its brain and be unable to control it. However, this kind of worry did not appear. After a few minutes, the iron-armored rhinoceros stood up as its body trembled. Plop! However, The moment it stood up, the sound of something falling to the ground was suddenly heard. Gray was surprised. He hurriedly looked at the iron-armored rhinoceros, only to see that it was standing quietly. He raised his eyes and looked around, only to discover that a blood fiend with purple spots on its body had suddenly collapsed without any warning. He tried to order the blood fiend to stand up, but there was no response. It was as if it had completely turned into a corpse. What's going on? Gray was surprised. When he was fighting with the iron-armored rhinoceros, he did not use this blood fiend. Logically speaking, this blood fiend should not have been injured. So why did it suddenly lose control? Could it be? However, a guess quickly appeared in his mind. He walked up to the blood fiend with purple spots on its body and used his ability to control corpses again. Plop! While trembling, the purple-spotted blood fiend stood up again. In the moment it stood up, Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. Another blood fiend, a blood fiend with yellow fur all over its body, suddenly collapsed like the purple-spotted blood fiend. Has it reached its limit? The answer was obvious. The number of corpses that he could control had reached its limit, and the limit was 20. It was easy to understand that there was a limit to the ability to control corpses. If there was no limit to the ability to control corpses, then the white-haired, ape-type blood fiend, Gray, had encountered previously would have been able to wipe out all the blood fiends with its ability to control corpses. If it was not powerful enough, it could simply overwhelm it with numbers. However, in reality, it did not manage to wipe out all the blood fiends. Hence, there was a limit to the ability to control corpses. Gray had already expected this. A limit of 20 corpses? That's not bad. The ability to control corpses was a very powerful ability. Even if there was only a limit of 20 corpses, and even if the control blood fiends could not use their abilities, it was still an extremely powerful ability. According to Gray's estimation, with the fusion of the Wind Wolf's speed characteristic, the Frost Tiger's strength characteristic, the Shadow Snake's defense characteristic, and the Steel-Armed Ape's Iron Arm characteristic, he would only be able to fight 2 ferocious warriors at the same level as him. As for the ability to control corpses, he could already fight 1 against 4. As for now, it was definitely more than that. After all, the number of corpses he could control had increased to 20. From this point, it was not difficult to see how powerful the ability to control corpses was. If there was a blood technique related to the ability to control corpses, then this blood technique would definitely be a special one. Moreover, it would definitely be one of the most powerful among special blood techniques. The number of blood fiends has reached a limit. If I want to further enhance the ability to control corpses, then I can only work on their quality. The best way to improve the quality is naturally to control blood fiends of higher levels. Gray narrowed his eyes slightly, and a trace of anticipation appeared on his face. With 20 corpses under my control, even if I can't use the abilities of the blood fiends, my combat strength should still be extremely powerful. I wonder if there is a possibility of challenging a berserk blood fiend? When a Mesfi family was hunting him down in Okamar Kiate, Gray was worried that he would not be a match for the berserk blood warriors even if he used his ability to control corpses. Therefore, he hurriedly escaped from Okamar Kiate overnight. At that time, he controlled a total of 9 blood fiends and an average-sized man. In total, he controlled 10 corpses. Now that the number of corpses he could control had reached a limit of 20, he could not help but have the idea of hunting down berserk blood fiends. In fact, he had already had this idea long ago. Since there was a limit to the number of corpses he could control, then he would strengthen it with quality. When he guessed that there would be a limit to the number of corpses he could control, he had this idea. Of course, Gray was not sure if his ability to control corpses could control the corpses of berserk blood fiends that were more powerful. After all, he had not tried it before. Chapter 184. After a short rest, Gray set off to search for a mad-level blood fiend. An hour later, Gray found a blood fiend with fiery red fur all over its body. It was surrounded by his army of blood fiends. This blood fiend was more than 2 meters long. The red fur on its body was extremely long and fluffy. It looked like a burning flame on its body. Surrounded by more than 10 blood fiends and 6 humans, it roared angrily and turned its body from time to time. It bared its fangs at the blood fiends surrounding it as a show of force. But from its voice, one could hear its uneasiness. Obviously, even a bloodthirsty blood fiend would feel uneasy when surrounded by so many blood fiends. It shouldn't be a mad-level blood fiend. From a distance, Gray observed carefully and shook his head slightly. Unless one knew this type of blood fiend, one could only accurately judge its level through battle. But there were other methods outside of battle, such as judging by its size. A mad-level blood fiend was above a murderous-level blood fiend. Its overall strength was much stronger than a murderous-level blood fiend. Under normal circumstances, a mad-level blood fiend would have no problem fighting 5 murderous-level blood fiends at their peak. Such blood fiends would mostly be larger than murderous-level blood fiends. Under normal circumstances, they would be more than 3 meters long. Of course, this kind of judgment was very rough. After all, some blood fiends looked petite, but were extremely powerful. But with this kind of method, there was still a 50% accuracy rate. Let's give it a try. With a thought, Gray immediately commanded the iron-armored rhinoceros to charge toward the blood fiend. Thump, thump, thump. The iron-armored rhinoceros immediately charged toward the blood fiend. Howl. Facing the iron-armored rhinoceros, the blood fiend with red fur all over its body seemed to have found an outlet to vent its anger and uneasiness. It immediately pounced toward the iron-armored rhinoceros. Bang! The iron-armored rhinoceros's strongest point was its defense, but its strength was not weak either. It was comparable to Hanhu's strength. The blood fiend with red fur was directly sent flying by the iron-armored rhinoceros and fell to the ground in a sorry state. It's not a mad-level blood fiend. Also, its physical strength is not very strong. Upon seeing this, Gray shook his head and issued an order in his heart. A corner of the encirclement formed by the Blood Beast army immediately opened up. The blood fiend, which had long been scared out of its wits, immediately fled from the empty space. They had already collected a lot of blood. If they let Sarah and the others consume the blood every day when they returned, it would be enough to last them for a few months. There was no need to hunt murderous-level blood fiends anymore. He could already imagine the bitter look on Sarah's face when she returned because she had to drink the blood of blood fiends every day. Moreover, this blood fiend's strength, speed, defense, and other physical attributes weren't considered strong. After replacing it, it wouldn't increase the quality of his control. Gray continued his search. Half an hour later, he found a 3-meter-long bull-type blood fiend with 2 scimitar-like horns on both sides of its head. This was the first type of blood fiend corresponding to the Herculean bull sequence blood technique that Gray had obtained. Herculean bull. This time, Gray didn't miss it. After all, the Herculean bull sequence blood technique required this type of blood. Although Gray and the others didn't need it, it could be used to cultivate loyal soldiers. Moreover, the Herculean bull was strong and had a strong physical defense. After replacing it, it would increase the quality of Gray's control. Gray killed the Herculean bull and collected its blood to replace the blood fiends that didn't have strong physiques. He then continued his search. Half an hour later, he found a black-haired wolf-type blood fiend. After testing its strength, he gave up. An hour later, he found a skinny blood fiend. After testing its strength, he gave up. Gray slowly walked deeper into the redleaf forest. According to the introduction in the book, generally speaking, the stronger the blood fiend, the deeper it would be in the forest. 3 days later, Gray didn't know how far he had gone or whether he was still in Marquis Sidney's territory. He had completely entered the depths of the redleaf forest. Many of the blood fiends around him had been replaced by him. Out of the 6 humans he controlled, he only kept the middle-sized man and replaced the 5 assassins from the Shadow Serpent. After all, if these 5 assassins were discovered, it would be easy to connect them to the Rock family's destruction and cause unnecessary trouble. Roar. In the afternoon, a 3-meter-long blood fiend was surrounded by the army of blood fiends controlled by Gray. This was a lion-type blood fiend with golden red fur all over its body. It was surrounded by a total of 19 blood fiends and humans. He roared. His voice was filled with anger. but his head was held high, filled with a sense of arrogance. It should be a berserk blood fiend. Seeing this blood fiend, Gray's eyes suddenly lit up. Just from its appearance, Gray could feel that this blood fiend was extraordinary. With a body length of more than 3 meters and a head that was held high despite being surrounded by so many blood fiends, this blood fiend was extraordinary. Thump, thump, thump. Gray commanded the iron-armored rhinoceros to charge at the lion-type blood fiend, ready to test its strength. With a body length of 3 meters, the iron-armored rhinoceros was like a moving tank when it ran, ramming into the blood fiend. Roar! Facing the iron-armored rhinoceros, the lion-type blood fiend with golden-red fur was not afraid at all. It also charged at the iron-armored rhinoceros. The iron-armored rhinoceros lowered its head slightly and rammed its horns into the lion-type blood fiend. But at this moment, the lion-type blood fiend raised its forelimbs and slapped the iron-armored rhinoceros with its claws. Bang! The iron-armored rhinoceros was sent flying, and there were several clear scratches on the area where it was slapped. Gray's fur, which could only be cut by the blood fiend's ability, was actually scratched. A berserk blood fiend. At this moment, Gray was sure that the blood fiend in front of him was definitely a berserk blood fiend. Only a berserk blood fiend could leave such a wound on the iron-armored rhinoceros so easily. Surround and attack. Without hesitation, Gray commanded the blood fiends to surround and attack the lion-type blood fiend. A Herculean bull and a Herculean bear pounced on the lion-type blood fiend from the front. Bang, bang. The lion-type blood fiend slapped its front paws consecutively, and the two blood fiends were sent flying. The areas where they were slapped were badly mutilated, and it was obvious that they were seriously injured. However, at this time, even more blood fiends surrounded and attacked the lion-type blood fiend from both sides. Chi! A tiger-type blood fiend attacked the lion-type blood fiend from the left. Its sharp claws immediately left clear scratches on the lion-type blood fiend's body. Roar! The lion-type blood fiend was enraged by the pain. It turned around and slapped the tiger-type blood fiend with its front paws. Bang! The area where the tiger-type blood fiend was slapped caved in, and the surrounding area was badly mutilated. Chi, chi, chi. Blood fiends were constantly slapped away by the lion-type blood fiend, but there were also wounds on the lion-type blood fiend's body. Among the blood fiends that Gray had selected, many of them possessed great strength. The defense of the lion-type blood fiend in front of him was not considered strong among the berserk blood fiends. It was not strong enough to ignore attacks. Roar! The injured lion-type blood fiend roared. In the next moment, golden flames suddenly spread all over its limbs. Chi-chi! After the golden red flames appeared, clear traces of burning appeared on the ground. It was evident that the golden red flames were extremely hot. Whoosh! A bear-type blood fiend was slapped and sent flying. With the area where it was slapped as the center, a terrifying burn mark appeared. Fortunately, this bear-type blood fiend was already dead. It was controlled by the ability to control corpses. As long as its head was not smashed, it would not die. Otherwise, this bear-type blood fiend would definitely be severely injured and die. Could it be a blood fiend of the same rank as the flaming lion? Seeing this scene, Gray could not help but think of the two lion-type blood fiends that he had encountered before. Similarly, golden red flames could wrap around their forelegs. However, compared to the lion-type blood fiend in front of him, the flames that the two lion-type blood fiends could use were much weaker. The blood fiend army continued to besiege the lion-type blood fiends, but they were constantly slapped away. Many of the blood fiends have been scalded to the point of being fatal to living creatures. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Although they tried their best to control the blood fiends and make them avoid their heads, there were still some blood fiends who could not dodge in time and were directly slapped in the head by the lion-type blood fiend's flaming claws. Those who were slapped had half of their heads charred black. After being sent flying, they did not get up again. However, being besieged by so many blood fiends, the lion-type blood fiend had also suffered extremely serious injuries. Its body was covered with cuts and bruises, and it was bleeding all over. The most serious injury was that a bull-type blood fiend had pierced its abdomen with its sharp horn. Blood was flowing out like a fountain. Roar! The lion-type blood fiend felt that it was reaching its limit. It wanted to escape, but it was surrounded and could not get away. It let out an angry roar. Whoosh! Chapter 185. Too much blood loss. After confirming that the lion-type blood fiend was dead, Gray hurriedly collected the blood with a rune bag. After a round of collection, he obtained about 150 portions of blood. Judging from the size of the blood fiend, more than half of its blood had been lost. The remaining blood was not enough to extract the blood essence. The main reason is that the murderous level blood fiend's attack power is too low. I can't kill it in a short period of time, so I lost too much blood. The murderous level blood fiend's attack power was too low for a blood fiend that had reached the mad level. In addition, he couldn't attack its head or throat, so he couldn't kill it in a short period of time. As a result, the blood fiend lost a lot of blood. In fact, the reason why the lion-type blood fiend died was because of the large amount of blood loss. What huge loss! Looking back at his army of blood fiends, Gray couldn't help but smile bitterly. 4 of the blood fiend's brains were damaged and could no longer be controlled. Most of the other blood fiends had horrifying injuries on their bodies. They had become disabled, and their combat power was greatly reduced. Even the iron-armored rhinoceros, which had the strongest defense, had many injuries on its body. I hope I can control it. Otherwise, the loss this time will be too great. Although only 4 of his blood fiends were completely destroyed, including the ones that were severely damaged, he had lost at least 10 blood fiends in this battle. Patter! Using his ability to control corpses, a black meatball with tentacles fell on the lion-type blood fiend's body and slowly crawled into its mouth. Patter, patter, patter. As the black meatball crawled in, the corpse of the lion-type blood fiend began to tremble slightly. 1 minute, 2 minutes. A few minutes had passed. In the past, he should have already controlled the lion-type blood fiend, but he still couldn't control it. Just as Gray was worried that his control had failed, the lion-type blood fiend stood up, trembling. Seeing this, Gray heaved a sigh of relief. But at the next moment, patter! The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground was heard. Gray's expression changed. He hurriedly confirmed the source of the sound. After confirming that it wasn't the lion-type blood fiend, he heaved a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. He looked back at the fallen blood fiend and saw a blood fiend with gray scales on its body. This blood fiend's head isn't injured, so it shouldn't have gone out of control. Could it be that it has reached its limit like before? Gray frowned as he walked to the side of the gray-scaled blood beast. No, even including this gray-scaled blood beast, I can only control 16 beasts in total, which is far from the upper limit. Could it be? A guess formed in Gray's mind. A berserk-class blood fiend was much stronger than a murderous-class blood fiend. It was definitely more difficult to control it. Would it be because of this that the number of blood fiends he could control would decrease? To put it simply, he could control up to 20 murderous-level blood fiends. However, the number of mad-level blood fiends would be drastically reduced. That's possible. After all, if he could control 20 blood fiends of any grade, the white-haired ape-type blood fiend back then would have swept through all the other blood fiends. If the white-haired ape-type blood fiend used 20 murderous-level blood fiends to hunt down a mad-level blood fiend, then replaced all 20 murderous-level blood fiends with mad-level blood fiends, then used 20 mad-level blood fiends to kill a barbarian-level blood fiend. By analogy, the white-haired ape-type blood fiend would have swept through all the other blood fiends and become the most powerful blood fiend. But in fact, such a thing did not happen. Therefore, it was inevitable that there would be a drastic reduction in the number of blood fiends he could control. I'll know if this is the case after I give it a try. Gray took all the beasts he could control and began to search for blood fiends. Half an hour later, he found a murderous level blood fiend covered with white scales. In order to test the combat power of the lion-type blood fiend, Gray ordered the lion-type blood fiend to charge forward and attack. It easily crushed the blood fiend. Even without the blood fiend ability, the lion-type blood fiend could still crush the blood fiend with its physical strength alone. The white-haired blood fiend was injured as soon as the lion-type blood fiend stepped forward and slapped it. The injured white-haired blood fiend fled in fear, but the lion-type blood fiend easily caught up and slapped it back. The white-haired blood fiend used its blood fiend ability to attack the lion-type blood fiend with a water arrow, but the lion-type blood fiend easily dodged it. The lion-type blood fiend was slapped to the ground and pinned to the ground. Its claws dug a big hole in the white-haired blood fiend's body and killed it on the spot. Gray had ordered the lion-type blood fiend not to attack the head and throat. Otherwise, it would have been even easier to kill it. He used his ability to control corpses to control the white-scaled blood beast. The moment the white-scaled blood beast was under his control, the other blood beast that was under his control suddenly fell to the ground. As expected, seeing this scene, Gray's face revealed an expression of as expected. Obviously, Gray's guess was right. The number of blood fiends had reached the limit of what he could control. Including the lion-type blood fiend, I have a total of 16 blood fiends left. In other words, if I can control 5 murderous-level blood fiends, I can only control 1 mad-level blood fiend. Based on this ratio, if all the murderous-level blood fiends were replaced with mad-level blood fiends, Gray could only control 4 blood fiends. Is it worth exchanging 20 murderous-level blood fiends for 4 mad-level blood fiends? This question flashed across Gray's mind, and he already had an answer. From the previous battle with the white-haired blood fiend, it was not difficult to tell that even 1 mad-level blood fiend was stronger than 5 murderous-level blood fiends. Exchanging all the murderous-level blood fiends for mad-level blood fiends was completely worth it. Most importantly, the mad-level blood fiend in front of him was only average in terms of physical strength. If the one being controlled was a mad-level blood fiend with stronger physical strength, its combat strength would be enhanced significantly. After making up his mind, Gray began to search for mad-level blood fiends. 4 days later, he encountered a mad-level leopard blood fiend. Excluding its tail, this leopard blood fiend was about 3 meters long. Its limbs were slender and strong, and its body was covered with purple spots. These purple spots were curved like zigzagged lightning bolts. As a leopard-type blood fiend, its speed was usually extremely fast. As expected, the leopard blood fiend possessed an extremely terrifying speed. Fortunately, Gray was controlling too many blood fiends. There was 1 mad-level blood fiend, 14 murderous-level blood fiends, and a murderous-level blood warrior. Quantity made up for the difference in speed. Besieged from all sides, the leopard blood fiend was unable to escape and was killed by the besiegement. 3 days later, he encountered a mad-level ox-type blood fiend. This ox-type blood fiend was green all over. Its body was 4 meters long, and its forelegs were as thick as water buckets. Standing there, it looked like a tank. It was a mad-level blood fiend of the Herculean Bull series, a mad bull. Fighting it was no different from fighting a real tank. Its fur was as hard as steel plates, and its skin was as hard as iron. After expending a lot of effort and losing 7 murderous-level blood fiends, he finally managed to kill the mad bull. 5 days later, after controlling the mad bull and replenishing the murderous-level blood fiends, Gray encountered a mad-level crocodile-type blood fiend. The crocodile-type blood fiend was more than 5 meters long, and its thick tail was full of bumps. When it swung its tail, it was as if a 1,000-pound hammer had smashed down. Any blood fiend that was hit by the tail would be turned into a pile of mud. The ferocious crocodile's mouth was unusually sharp. Once it bit down, there was no way it could stop. As for its ability as a blood fiend, it was also extremely powerful. A large amount of mud would turn into thick tentacles and wrap around its opponent. With a squeeze, the opponent's bones would be crushed. Similarly, it took a lot of blood fiends to kill the crocodile-type blood fiend. Since then, Gray's creatures of control had all become mad-level blood fiends. 1 leopard-type blood fiend, 1 ox-type blood fiend, 1 lion-type blood fiend, and 1 crocodile-type blood fiend. In the evening, Gray set up a tent in a clearing in the forest. The lion-type blood fiend was ordered by Gray to hunt. The ox-type blood fiend, leopard-type blood fiend, and crocodile-type blood fiend guarded him. Half a month had passed, and the dry rations that he had brought along had been depleted. He had no choice but to hunt by himself. Fortunately, in order to prevent situations like this from happening, he had asked the kitchen chef to prepare some seasonings that could be used for barbecue. Of course, as a newbie, the taste was mediocre. Gray, who was cultivating in the clearing in the forest, suddenly stopped cultivating. A sharp glint flashed across his eyes. As a creature of control, although Gray could not see what the other party was looking at, he could vaguely sense the other party's condition. At this moment, he could sense that the lion-type blood fiend was in the middle of a fierce battle. It was not a one-sided battle. Obviously, the lion-type blood fiend had met its match. Gray immediately led the other 3 blood fiends and rushed in that direction. Soon, he arrived at the battle site and saw the lion-type blood fiend fighting with the other party. Chapter 186. Berserker. These people were not weak. The strongest one was a man in a greenish-gray battle suit. The man held a saber in his hand. Every slash was enough to force the lion-type blood fiend back and leave a large wound on its body. Without a doubt, this man was a berserker. Stop! Seeing that the lion-type blood fiend was about to be completely destroyed under the attacks of this group of people, Gray hurriedly stopped them. He also ordered the ox-type blood fiends and crocodile-type blood fiends to help the lion-type blood fiend. Who is it? Oh no, retreat. Suddenly hearing someone shout, the group of people besieging the lion-type blood fiend looked in the direction of the voice. The next moment, their facial expressions changed. Thump, thump, thump. 2 blood fiends that were at least 4 meters long were violently charging toward them. Their footsteps made violent sounds as they landed on the ground. Just from the sound of their running, one could feel the strength of these 2 blood fiends. Retreat, retreat. Under the leadership of the man in the greenish-gray battle suit, these people abandoned the lion-type blood fiends without hesitation and retreated to the side vigilantly. They only stopped when they confirmed that there was no one chasing after them. After driving these people away, Gray walked to the side of the lion-type blood fiend. After sizing it up, he could not help but frown slightly. The attack of the man in the greenish-gray battle suit was extremely powerful. There were many places on the lion-type blood fiend's body that revealed deep white bones. He could not help but raise his head and look at these people with dissatisfaction. Seeing Gray's dissatisfied gaze, these people could not help but show a dignified expression. It was because Gray's appearance was too grand. They had hunted blood fiends for many years and were very familiar with blood fiends. They had already recognized that the 4 blood fiends following Gray were all berserker-level blood fiends. How could a person with berserker-level blood fiends not make them feel dignified? The man in the greenish-gray suit gritted his teeth, walked out of the crowd, and apologized to Gray. Hello, we are from the Red Wing. We are really sorry. We did not know that these were your battle beasts. Red Wing? Gray raised his eyebrows. He had never heard of this mercenary group. This mercenary group should be a mercenary group outside of Marquis Sidney's territory. If he was in Sidney's territory, there is no way he wouldn't have heard of a mercenary group led by a berserker. This also proved that he had left Marquis Sidney's territory. We are willing to compensate you for our mistake just now. This is our apology. Please accept it. Seeing that Gray's attitude was unclear, the man in green thought for a moment and gestured behind him. Immediately, a woman in red walked out from behind him with a leather bag in her hand and walked towards Gray. Gray took the leather bag while keeping his guard up against the woman. He took a look inside and saw that it was full of magic coins. Judging from a weight, there should be more than 100 magic coins, which would be more than 10,000 gold coins. I accept your apologies, Gray said as he put away the leather bag. Since the other party had apologized and compensated him, he naturally couldn't pursue them. He couldn't possibly take their lives just because they had injured the lion-type blood beast, could he? Besides, the other party's strength was not weak. Judging from the previous battle, among the dozen people, the man in green was a berserker. Among the remaining people, at least 7 or 8 were berserker. Although this strength was slightly weaker than Gray's, who had 4 berserker blood beasts, it wasn't too far off. After all, Gray's berserker blood beasts couldn't use their blood beast abilities. In terms of combat strength, they couldn't be compared to real berserker blood beasts. Gray nodded to the other party. Under the protection of the 4 berserker blood beasts, he turned and left. Soon, he disappeared into the forest. Phew, I almost thought there was going to be a conflict. Who is this person? He actually has 4 berserker blood beasts following him. Seeing that Gray's figure had completely disappeared, the dozen or so people couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Facing a person with 4 berserker blood beasts, the pressure was not ordinary. Captain, these 4 blood beasts don't seem to be combat beasts. The woman who handed the leather bag to Gray frowned slightly and said to the man in green, "Yes." The man in green nodded. "If I'm not mistaken, these 4 blood beasts should be dead. They are controlled by the corpse controlling ability of the corpse ape." Corpse ape? The kind of blood beast that can control corpses? The woman looked surprised. Yes, it's that kind of blood beast. The other party either has a demonic weapon or cultivates the blood technique of the corpse ape. The man in the grayish-green battlesuit said. Seeing that the lion-type blood beast was injured, he thought that it was an injured berserker blood beast. Therefore, he prepared to hunt it down. However, after the battle, he quickly discovered the abnormality of the lion-type blood beast. Since there was no way out, he could only continue the battle. It's time to go back. After returning to the open space in the forest where the tent was set up, Gray let the 4 blood beasts guard the perimeter and put the previous matter aside. His corpse controlling ability had been raised to the maximum. At most, it could increase his individual combat strength. In general, his corpse controlling ability had almost reached its limit. He had basically achieved his goal of coming to the Red Leaf Forest, and it was time to go back. I have obtained a lot of blood this time. What blood should I choose for the next transformation? Gray directly gave up on the blood of the Berserker Blood Beast. Since he could choose the blood of the Berserker Blood Beast, he naturally couldn't choose the Berserker Blood Beast. Blood Beasts had their strength. After consuming the Berserker Blood Beast, the strength of the Berserker Blood Beast would reach the Berserker level. After consuming the Berserker Blood Beast, the strength of the Berserker Blood Beast would reach the Berserker level. In comparison, consuming the Berserker Blood Beast was naturally more cost-effective, unless it was an extremely powerful ability that could be used even when one was at the Berserker level. The corpse-controlling ability and the iron arm of the steel-armed ape were obviously such abilities. Therefore, he chose to consume them. Lion-type blood beast that can control flames? Crocodile-type blood beast that can control soil? Bull-type blood beast that has great strength and strong defense? Or a leopard-type blood beast with terrifying speed? Obviously, with the blood types that he had mastered, if he had to choose, he could only choose between these 4 blood beasts. Leopard-type blood beast. After pondering for a moment, Glenn raised his eyebrows. Among the 4 blood beasts, the leopard-type blood beast was the most unique. Gray estimated that the leopard-type blood beast speed was definitely faster than the Gale Wolf. If he consumed the leopard-type blood beast's blood, his speed would be unmatched among those of the same level. As for the other 3 blood beasts, their abilities could only be considered sparse and ordinary. One could control flames, one could control soil, and one could only be considered average with thick skin and thick flesh. It's a pity that there are no special abilities like the corpse controlling ability. After tasting the sweetness of the corpse controlling ability, Gray yearned for special abilities. However, he also knew that special abilities were not easy to come across. Moreover, blood beasts with special abilities were quite powerful. Although he had 4 berserk-level blood beasts, if he really encountered a berserk-level blood beast with special abilities, he might not be able to kill it. After resting for a night, Gray packed up everything the next day and prepared to return. However, at this moment, he noticed that the dozen people that he met yesterday evening were heading toward the empty field. He showed a trace of doubt on his face and ordered the 4 berserk-level blood beasts to protect him while he waited for the arrival of the other party. Your Excellency, the other party stopped when they were 30 meters away from Gray. Among them, a man in a green-gray battle suit walked out and spoke to Gray. What's the matter? Gray remained alert and asked. Sorry to disturb you, but we have a cooperation to discuss with you. The man in the green-gray suit said. Cooperation? Gray sized up the man in the green-gray suit and asked. What kind of cooperation? In fact, we found a jasper lizard. However, with our abilities, it is quite difficult to hunt it down. Therefore, we would like to cooperate with you to hunt it down." The man in the green-gray suit hurriedly said. "Jasper Lizard?" Upon hearing this type of blood beast, Gray's eyes lit up. The Jasper Lizard was a berserk-level blood beast with plant abilities. If that was all, Gray's eyes would not have lit up. The special thing about this type of blood beast was that it seemed to have the bloodline of a dragon. Although it was very shallow, it was enough to make this type of blood beast a powerful existence among its peers. Not only did it have great strength, speed, and defense, but its plant abilities were also quite powerful among berserk-level blood beasts. Moreover, the most special thing about this type of blood beast was that it could absorb the life of plants and nourish itself, allowing it to recover quickly. If he could really hunt this type of blood beast, it would be a better choice than the leopard-type blood beast. At the thought of this, Gray looked sharply at the man in the green-gray suit. Chapter 187. The blood belongs to us, and the corpse belongs to you. We will not destroy the head when we attack. Hearing that Gray was interested, the man in the grayish-green battle suit heaved a sigh of relief. Although he was confident, he could not be sure that the other party would agree. If Gray did not agree, then they would have to give up on the hunt. After all, with the Red Wings' combat strength, killing normal blood fiends of the berserk level was not a problem. However, hunting special blood fiends was beyond their capabilities. Gray's pupils suddenly shrank. From the distribution plan proposed by the other party should have seen the origin of his corpse control ability. Otherwise, he would not have said things like "the corpse belongs to you" and "do not destroy the head." After all, it was daytime. It was easy to see the difference between a blood fiend controlled by the corpse control ability and a normal blood fiend. As a mercenary, the other party must have seen a lot of blood fiends. It was normal for him to recognize the white-haired ape-type blood fiend. After understanding this, Gray calmed down and asked, "You saw the origin of my ability?" "Yes. If I'm not wrong, your ability should be to control the corpse of a corpse ape." The man in the grayish-green battle suit nodded. "So that type of blood fiend is called a corpse ape." The man in the grayish-green battle suit's words made Gray finally understand the type of blood fiend. However, he did not show it on his face. "Not enough. The corpse is not enough. In addition, I will compensate you with 50,000 gold coins." The man in the grayish-green battle suit said after some consideration. "In addition, 10 portions of the blood of the Jasper Lizard." Gray said, "Okay, deal." The man in the grayish-green battle suit nodded without hesitation. He did not ask why Gray wanted the blood of the Jasper Lizard. The blood of blood fiends was often used in alchemy, especially the blood of special blood fiends. It was normal for Gray to need it. In the lush forest, 2 groups of people were moving forward. One group was made up of more than 10 men and women, while the other group was made up of 1 person and 4 blood fiends. Although they were traveling together, the 2 groups kept a clear distance from each other and were wary of each other. From time to time, there would be gazes sizing Gray up. Their gazes were filled with curiosity, as well as a trace of fear. They were curious about Gray's ability to control the blood fiends' corpses. They were curious about Gray's young age, and they were fearful of Gray's strength. Although they didn't know exactly how old Gray was, it was obvious that he wasn't too old. Most of them were only mid-level blood warriors when they were Gray's age. While these people were sizing them up, Gray was also sizing them up. A mercenary group, led by a berserker. This mercenary group scale couldn't be considered small, but it wasn't clear if the other party had a noble background. Although nobles had a unique identity and enjoyed many privileges, not all families and forces would flock to them. Regional restrictions meant that the status of nobles was only effective in certain areas. Once they left this area, they would be no different from ordinary people. In addition, after becoming a noble, they were bound to serve the upper nobles. To a certain extent, their life and death were in the hands of the upper nobles. Because of these 2 reasons, not all families and forces wanted to become a noble family. Such families would be considered to have deviated from the orthodox and would generally be looked down upon by the nobles. Of course, contempt was contempt. In fact, these 2 groups often cooperated with each other. The nobles needed mercenary groups to hunt blood fiends for them and obtain blood fiends' blood and various kinds of leather. On the other hand, mercenaries needed to earn money from the nobles to cover their various expenses. After walking for a few miles, the group of people suddenly stopped. Seeing them like this, Gray stopped as well. "Sir, the jade lizard is not far ahead." The man in the greenish-gray battle suit spoke to Gray with a cautious gaze. Gray nodded, a trace of caution in his eyes. Although he had 4 blood fiends under his control, he couldn't use the blood fiend's abilities. He didn't have the confidence to hunt special blood fiends. It was because of this that he chose to cooperate with the Red Wing. Otherwise, he could have waited for the Red Wing to give up and leave before slowly searching the area. Even with his current strength, he didn't have the confidence to hunt the blood fiends, let alone the Red Wing. Therefore, if he refused, the Red Shirt mercenary group would definitely give up. The group tried their best not to make too much noise as they slowly moved forward. However, there were 4 blood fiends in the group, and it was destined that they couldn't be completely silent. After all, it was too difficult for a blood fiend to move through the dense foliage of the forest without making any noise. Rustle, 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 rustle. Not far away, the sound of trees shaking violently could be heard. It was as if a huge monster was coming this way. It found us. It's coming for us. Gray and the rest knew that it was almost impossible to not be discovered with a blood fiend following them. Therefore, they had already expected a huge monster to come. Even so, some of the Red Wing members still had a trace of panic on their faces. After all, it was a mad-class blood fiend, and a special one at that. Woo! A majestic cry was heard, and all the animals in the surrounding forest fled in panic. Then, a huge monster appeared. It was a huge monster that was more than 5 meters long and covered in green scales. Its head was sharp and triangular, and its 4 legs were as thick and strong as buckets. Its body was thick and sturdy, spread out and wait for an opportunity to attack. The man in green armor had a dignified look on his face. After instructing his teammates, he turned to Gray and requested, "Sir, please let your blood fiends entangle it." "Understood." Gray nodded. Since he had agreed, he naturally wouldn't slack off. In terms of urgency, he was more concerned about the Jasper Lizard than the Red Wing members. He immediately ordered the Ox-type and Crocodile-type blood fiends to charge at the Jasper Lizard from the front, while the Lion-type and Leopard-type blood fiends charged at the Jasper Lizard from the sides. Thump! 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 The 4 blood fiends rampaged and broke many trees as they charged at the Jasper Lizard. Finally, the 2 sides collided. The Ox-type blood fiend was the first to engage the Jasper Lizard. It lowered its head and revealed 2 sharp horns as it charged at the Jasper Lizard. Bang! Facing the charging Ox-type blood fiend, the Jade Lizard quickly twisted its body. Relying on its speed that was faster than the Ox-type blood fiend, it avoided the 2 horns of the Ox-type blood fiend and then slammed its head into the side of the Ox-type blood fiend. Bang! The Ox-type blood fiend was sent flying, and the area where it was hit was obviously damaged. The Ox-type blood fiend was good at strength and defense and was not weaker than the Jasper Lizard in terms of strength. However, the Jasper Lizard relied on its speed to avoid the Ox-type blood fiend's head-on collision. Whoosh! At this moment, an ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other was heard. The Leopard-type blood fiend suddenly approached the Jasper Lizard and clawed at it. However, its claws scratched the Jasper Lizard's body as if it was scratching a steel plate. It only left a shallow wound, and only a little bit of dark red blood flowed out. As a Leopard-type blood fiend, it was faster than the Jasper Lizard in terms of movement speed. Before the Jasper Lizard could react, it had already approached the Jasper Lizard. This showed how fast it was. However, its weakness was its strength, while the Jasper Lizard was good at defense and was equally powerful. As a result, its attack only caused minor injuries to the Jasper Lizard. Puffed. The Lion-type blood fiend, which was 1 step slower, was much more powerful even though it was not as fast as the Leopard-type blood fiend. It left 4 deep scratches on the Jasper Lizard's body, causing dark red blood to flow out continuously. At this moment, the Crocodile-type blood fiend arrived. It opened its bloody mouth and bit one of the Jasper lizard's legs, causing blood to flow out. Seeing this, the Red Wing immediately attacked. A man in a greenish-gray battlesuit suddenly appeared beside the Jasper lizard and slashed at Bayushi's body, leaving a deep wound on the Jasper lizard's body. On the other hand, the mercenaries of the Red Wing who had reached the vicious Blood Warrior level either used their Blood Fiend abilities to attack the Jasper lizard or attacked it from the side, leaving shallow wounds on its body. In this first confrontation, Gray's side had the upper hand. However, Gray did not relax because of this. The battle had just begun. Facing 4 Blood Fiends of the same level, a Berserker, and several vicious Blood Warriors, it was normal for the Jasper lizard to be injured. Furthermore, the Jasper lizard had yet to use its Blood Fiend abilities, while his 4 Blood Fiends did not have any. To determine which side had the upper hand, he would have to wait until the Jasper lizard used its Blood Fiend abilities. He continued to observe. Woo! The injured Jasper lizard roared. Then, with it as the center, the surrounding plants started to tremble. Countless trees started to move like animals. Thick vines that looked like tentacles suddenly sprouted from the ground. Some branches suddenly elongated and bent, their tips becoming sharp. Dozens of vines shot toward the crocodile-type Blood Fiend that was biting the Jasper lizard. The vines wrapped around the crocodile-type Blood Fiend and bound it completely, helping the Jasper lizard to break free from the crocodile-type Blood Fiend's bite. Most of the plants attacked the other 3 Blood Fiends and the Red Wing. Bang, bang. Apart from the leopard-type Blood Fiend that managed to dodge the vines due to its speed, the lion-type Blood Fiends and the ox-type Blood Fiends were all hit. The lion-type Blood Fiend was struck by a thick vine and was sent flying. The ox-type Blood Fiend was pierced by the plant javelins, piercing through its skin and into its flesh. These plants were controlled by the Jasper lizard's Blood Fiend abilities. Their strength and sharpness were comparable to that of real steel. Even the ox-type Blood Fiend, which had strong defense, was injured. On the other hand, the Red Wing side did not receive the Jasper lizard's attention because of the 4 Blood Fiends' gigantic bodies. Even so, some of them were still injured. One of them could not dodge in time and was sent flying by a vine. He immediately vomited blood and was seriously injured. Another person's thigh was pierced by a branch and nailed to the ground. Chapter 188. What a powerful Blood Fiend ability. Gray, who was far away from the battle, was not attacked. However, his eyes were filled with surprise and anticipation. He was surprised by the power of the Jade Lizard Blood Fiend and was looking forward to using this powerful Blood Fiend ability as his trump card after consuming its blood. Despite his surprise and anticipation, Gray did not stop commanding the 4 Blood Fiends. He commanded the lion-type Blood Fiend to bite off the vines that were entangling the crocodile Blood Fiend, and the leopard-type Blood Fiend to remove the plants that had turned into sharp blades and pierced the ox-type Blood Fiend. Soon, the 4 Blood Fiends attacked the Jade Lizard again. Not only the 4 Blood Fiends, but the man in the greenish-gray battle suit and the other members of the Red Wing also used various methods to attack the Jade Lizard. Rustle, rustle. Facing their attacks, the Jade Lizard controlled the plants to counterattack. The vines either entangled or turned into sharp weapons and pierced forward. However, compared to when it first used its ability to control plants, the Jade Lizard's attacks were obviously weaker. The current attack was equivalent to a weaker version of the previous attack. It seems that the initial level of plant control consumed a lot of the Jade Lizard's energy. Seeing this, Gray was deep in thought. When the Jade Lizard first used its ability to control plants, its power was simply too outrageous. Facing the siege of 4 Blood Fiends, a Berserk Blood Warrior, and several ferocious Blood Warriors, the Jade Lizard still managed to emerge victorious. Its power was simply too strong. Since it did not use its ability again after using it, it seemed that such an attack consumed a lot of energy. Even the Jade Lizard could not use it continuously. Whoosh! The leopard-type Blood Fiend with terrifying speed avoided the obstacles of the plants and approached the Jade Lizard. Slash! Its sharp claws scratched the Jade Lizard's body, leaving a bloody wound. Woo! Enraged, the Jade Lizard twisted its body and whipped its thick tail at the leopard-type blood fiend. The leopard-type blood fiend nimbly dodged the tail and continued to fight with the jade lizard. Chi-Chi. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit's battle saber was wrapped in green light. With one slash, the vines that were attacking him were easily cut off. Then he broke through the blockade, approached the jade lizard's side, and slashed at it with his saber. Puff! The battle saber slashed at the jade lizard's body. Accompanied by a green light, the saber slashed into the lizard's body and sank deep into the lizard's body. Immediately, the lizard started bleeding. As a berserker who wielded a magic weapon, even if he hadn't used his ability as a blood fiend, his battle prowess was already stronger than any of the 4 blood fiends Gray controlled. Woo! Compared to the leopard-type blood fiend's injuries, the man's attack could clearly be considered a serious injury. The jade lizard howled in pain and anger. It turned around and bit at the man in the grayish-green battle armor. The man in the grayish-green battle armor held his saber and fought with it, with the leopard-type blood fiend and the man in the greenish-gray battle suit restraining the jade lizard. The jade lizard's control over the plants in the other areas immediately weakened. Dong, dong, dong. The ox-type, lion-type, and crocodile-type blood fiends immediately broke through the blockade and rushed toward the jade lizard. The other mercenaries of the Red Wing also broke through the blockade and rushed over. Poof, poof, poof. Faced with the siege of 4 blood fiends, a berserker, and several ferocious blood warriors, the jade lizard's injuries gradually worsened. Seeing that the jade lizard was seriously injured and exhausted, the man in the grayish-green battle armor let out a low growl, and his expression became solemn. Whoosh! Then, red light gathered on his back, and suddenly formed 2 red wings on his back. With a flap of his wings, he left the ground and flew up. Swoosh, swoosh. Suddenly, 2 rays of fiery red light appeared on both sides of his wings and transformed into 2 flaming sharp blades that slashed toward the jade lizard. Woo! The jade lizard instinctively felt danger, but it was already exhausted and entangled with the blood fiends. It couldn't dodge in time. Chi-Chi. The 2 rays of fiery red light, with scorching heat, left 2 huge gashes on the jade lizard's body. The area around the gashes was char-black. The jade lizard was seriously injured and on the verge of death. It was already seriously injured, and now it was attacked by a berserker's blood fiend ability. The jade lizard was on the verge of death. A fire-type, bird-type blood fiend. While commanding the 4 blood fiends to continue attacking the jade lizard, Gray had a look of realization. Seeing the red wings on the man in the grayish-green battle armor and the 2 rays of flames, he understood why this mercenary group was called the Red Wing. He also understood the type of blood technique that the man in the grayish-green battle armor practiced. There is no doubt that the blood technique that he practiced was a fire-type, bird-type blood technique. The wings on his back were because after reaching the level of a berserker could use the power of blood to construct a part of the blood fiend's body characteristics. For example, the blood fiend's sharp claws, tail, horn, and so on could be used as a means of attack or movement. As for what kind of blood technique one could construct, it depended on the type of blood technique that one practiced. The man in the grayish-green battle armor had clearly constructed the wings of a bird. The 4 blood fiends attacked the jade lizard fiercely and were about to kill it. However, at this moment, the jade lizard, which was so severely injured that it could barely stand, suddenly howled. Then, a strange scene appeared. With the jade lizard as the center, all the plants within a 100-meter radius emitted a green glow. After these rays of light appeared, they quickly converged and surged towards the jade lizard like water flowing downwards. As the green glow gathered, the numerous wounds on the jade lizard's body quickly healed. In a few seconds, it had completely recovered and there were no longer any signs of injury. Crack, crack, crack. In contrast, the surrounding trees all withered and their leaves fell as if they had all withered and died. Reverse feeding. Seeing this, Gray narrowed his eyes and immediately understood what had happened. According to the introduction in the book, the jade lizard could not only control plants, but also absorb the life of plants to nourish itself. Obviously, the other party had done this just now and absorbed the life of the plants within a 100-meter radius to accelerate its recovery. Thump, thump, thump. Although it had recovered, the jade lizard clearly knew how powerful its opponent was. After recovering, it immediately turned and fled in a direction. Stop it! Don't let it escape this area. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit with wings on his back shouted as he chased after the jade lizard. Gray did not need the other party's reminder, as he had already done so. Now that all the plants in this area had died, the jade lizard could not use reverse feeding or control the plants. It could be said that this was the most advantageous battlefield for them. Naturally, they could not let the jade lizard escape. Whoosh! The leopard blood fiend exploded with terrifying speed and blocked the jade lizard's path in an instant. It pounced on the jade lizard's body. Bang! The jade lizard twisted its body and flung the leopard blood fiend away. However, at this moment, the winged man in the greenish-gray battle suit had arrived and blocked the jade lizard's path. He slashed his saber at the jade lizard. Poof! Injuries appeared on the jade lizard's body again. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit was sent flying along with his saber. In terms of strength, he was not as strong as the jade lizard. However, because of his and the wind-chasing leopard obstruction, the ox-type, lion-type, and crocodile-type blood fiends had arrived. The lion-type blood fiend scratched the jade lizard's body and left a clear bloody wound. The ox-type blood fiend lowered its head and revealed its horns. It knocked the jade lizard to the side, causing it to stagger and a hole to appear in its body. The crocodile-type blood fiend bit the jade lizard's left front leg. A similar battle took place again. However, this time, the jade lizard could not use its plant ability or reverse feeding, so its threat was greatly reduced. As the attacks continued, wounds began to appear on his body, which had already recovered from his injuries. Chapter 189. Seeing that the jade lizard was dead, the men of the Red Wing hurried forward to collect the blood, while Gray summoned the 4 blood fiends back to him. Guarding against the Red Wing was one thing, but the other was to think about which blood fiend he should remove his control over. After the battle, just now, the 4 blood fiends must have sustained a lot of injuries. Fortunately, Gray had been controlling the ox-type and crocodile-type blood fiends to fight the jade lizard head-on, while the lion-type and leopard-type blood fiends, which were weaker in defense, attacked from the sides. The injuries on the 4 blood fiends did not affect their combat ability. This was also one of the benefits of corpse control. As long as the head was not destroyed and the 4 legs were not chopped off, the combat ability of the control blood fiends would not be reduced too much. Which blood fiend should I remove my control over? Gray raised his eyebrows. First of all, the ox-type blood fiend could not be removed. It had great strength and strong defense, making it an extremely qualified meat shield. Secondly, the leopard-type blood fiend could not be removed either. Although it had weak attack and defense, it was fast and could be used in many situations. For example, just now, the leopard-type blood fiend was able to catch up with the jade lizard, which bought time for the man in the greenish-gray battle suit and the other 3 blood fiends. Otherwise, with the speed of the jade lizard, the man in the greenish-gray battle suit might not be able to catch up with it, but the ox-type blood fiend and the other 2 blood fiends would definitely not be able to catch up. Now, only the crocodile-type blood fiends and the lion-type blood fiends were left. Among these 2 blood fiends, the crocodile-type blood fiend had strong defense and a strong biting ability. Once it bit its opponent, it would be difficult for the opponent to break free. The lion-type blood fiend, on the other hand, was quite balanced in all aspects. It had neither strong nor weak points. Lion-type blood fiend. The answer was obvious. Among the 4 blood fiends, the lion-type blood fiend was the least distinctive and would be of the least help in battle. After thinking about these things, the Red Wing had finished collecting the blood. The man in the greenish-gray battle suit walked over. Beside him was a woman in a red battle suit. "Sir, here are the promised 10 portions of jade lizard blood and 50,000 gold coins." Knowing that Gray was quite afraid of him, a berserker, the man in the azure-gray battle suit stood more than 20 meters away from Gray and then let the woman in the red battlesuit come forward and give the things in the previous agreement to Gray. Gray reached out and took it. There were a total of 2 items, a bronze bottle containing the jade lizard's blood and a leather bag containing a large amount of magic coins. He was indeed quite wary of the man in green-gray battle armor. He had not forgotten how the latter had killed the corpse ape back then. After approaching the corpse ape, before it could control the blood fiends, the former had launched a sneak attack and killed it with lightning speed. He didn't want what happened to the corpse ape to happen to him. Sir, the Red Wing is based in Mercenary City. If you have time in the future, please come and be our guest. Nodding to Gray, the man in the green-gray battle armor left with the Red Wing mercenary group. Gray looked in the direction in which the other party had left. After confirming that the other party had left, he removed the control of the lion-type blood fiend and walked to the corpse of the jade lizard. A few minutes later, trembling, the jade lizard stood up. Not bad. After instructing the jade lizard to move its body, Gray nodded in satisfaction. Although there were many injuries on its body, these injuries did not affect its movement and did not affect the jade lizard's combat strength much. The jade lizard was extremely strong in terms of speed, strength, and defense. In terms of combat strength, it was stronger than the other 3 blood fiends. After controlling it, it immediately became the strongest blood fiend under his control. A week later, Gray returned to the forest near Fergus Castle that hid the underground entrance. It seems that the jade lizard can only stay here. Gray lifted the cover of the dried branches and glanced at the entrance to the basement. Looking at the size of the 4 blood fiends, he helplessly discovered that the largest of the 4 blood fiends, the jade lizard, was unable to pass through the tunnel. It's good that it stays here. It can guard this entrance so that the Fergus family won't know that someone has infiltrated. After thinking for a while, Gray led the other 3 blood fiends into the tunnel. This entrance led directly to Fergus Castle, so its importance was self-evident. Although the mechanism was opened and closed from the inside, it was not impossible to open it with brute force. Leaving the jade lizard here could prevent enemies from sneaking in. As for Fergus Castle, with the 3 blood fiends there, even if a berserker were to attack, they would be able to deal with it and ensure its safety. After returning to the castle, Gray took a bath and changed his clothes. He felt much more comfortable. Although he could bathe in the Red Leaves forest, that was when there was a stream or a lake. If he did not encounter one, he could only endure it. Young Master Gray. Hello, young Master Gray. As he walked into the castle, he was immediately greeted by the respectful greetings of the servants. Gray nodded slightly in response, and then walked towards the white stone training field. At this time, Sarah should be practicing in the afternoon. Sure enough, when he arrived at the white stone training field, he saw Sarah cultivating there. She was wearing a blue battle suit, and her expression was serious and focused. She looked rather cute. Besides her, Caroline and Elise were also there. The former was wearing a purple battle suit, and her hair was tied into a ponytail. She looked valiant and formidable, while the latter was wearing a white battle suit. Gray sat in the pavilion and asked the servants to bring in pastries and freshly squeezed fruit juice. After waiting for a while, Sarah ran over. "Brother, you're back." Sarah happily hugged Gray's arm and shouted sweetly as she ran in front of Gray. "Yes." Gregor smiled as he looked at the other party. "Not bad. You're almost done with the first training posture of the second round." She had only started practicing for 4 months, and she was almost done with the first training posture. This cultivation progress was rather fast. Hee, of course, I'm a genius. The girl raised her sharp chin and said proudly. Then, he rolled his eyes and looked straight at Gray as he asked, "Brother, did you bring me a gift?" Gray could not help but stutter. He had originally planned to catch a blood fiend for Sarah as a battle beast. Unfortunately, although he had encountered many blood fiends, he had not encountered a newborn blood fiend. He could not help but smile. "Of course. What is it?" Sarah could not help but be happy. "It's a secret for now." Gray's face revealed a mysterious smile, but in his heart, he wondered if this girl would blame him when she found out about the gift he had prepared for her. In the Red Leaves Forest, he did not get anything else, but he did get a lot of blood fiend's blood. In the future, Sarah would have to consume Blood Fiend's blood every day. What gift? Do we have a share? Caroline and Elise walked over. Caroline was smiling and joking, while Elise looked at Gray with fear. Gray's strength had already made her unable to have any thoughts of going against Gray. Of course, everyone will have a share. As for what it is, you will know tomorrow. Gray smiled and asked curiously, "Why don't I see Brother Bernal? Do you want to visit the Iveline clan?" Caroline had a playful look on her face. Oh, Gray's face revealed a look of understanding. The Iveline clan was the clan that Bernal was engaged to. Now that the two clans were engaged, it was indeed time for them to interact more. Pa, pa, pa. At this moment, a series of hurried footsteps were heard. Gray and the others turned around and saw the person they were talking to just now running over. The person came to Gray and said anxiously, "Gray, you have to help me this time. Brother Bernal, what's going on? Didn't you go to the Iveline clan?" Gray asked curiously. The person who came was Bernal, who was supposed to be at the Iveline clan. "Something happened. I just came back from the Iveline clan." Bernal panted and said, "Gray, you have to help me this time. Tell me what's going on first." Gray raised his eyebrows and didn't agree immediately. Although he had a good relationship with Bernal, he had to see what the matter was before making a decision. A few days ago, an iron mine was discovered at the border of the Iveline clan's territory. However, another clan nearby also had their eyes on this iron mine. "I want to ask for your help to seize this iron mine," Bernal said quickly. "You don't want me to secretly." Gray's brows furrowed slightly. Although he had secretly wiped out two clans, these two clans had grudges with him. One of them tried to assassinate him, and the other almost killed Fergus and the others, including himself. That was why he took action. Asking him to kill a clan that had no relation to him was a common thing in noble clans, but he didn't want to do it. No. Bernal shook his head quickly. Although Gray didn't say it out loud, he could guess the specific meaning. After all, he was one of the insiders of those two matters. In order to seize the mining rights of the iron mine, the Evelyn's clan negotiated with that clan to decide the ownership through a battle between the younger generation. "I want you to represent the Evelyn's clan to participate. But I'm not a member of the Evelyn's clan. Besides, they can easily find out my identity." Gray frowned. It wasn't that he was arrogant, but he was considered a celebrity in the Sydney Marquee. "You can ask for external help. Of course, it must be a relative. The relationship between our clan and the Evelyn's clan also counts." "Gray, you?" Speaking of this, Bernal looked at Gray expectantly. No problem. Since it was like this, Gray naturally wouldn't refuse. After all, it was a simple matter. He had to give face to Bernal. "Thank you," Bernal said gratefully. Chapter 190. The next morning, the carriage left Fergus Castle and headed towards the Evelyn's family. Other than Bernal and Gray, Sarah and Caroline were also in the carriage. Caroline wanted to borrow books from the Evelyn's family. Sarah heard that Gray was going to represent the Evelyn's family in the battle and immediately requested to go with him. Elise didn't go. She probably knew that Gray didn't have a good impression of her, so she would try her best to avoid wherever Gray appeared. In the afternoon, the carriage stopped at the Evelyn's family. "Gray, sorry to trouble you this time." In the living room, Baron Evelyn's Derek Evelyn's, a middle-aged man with brown hair, thanked Gray. As someone who was favored by Viscount Fergus and had a chance to be infected by the Marquis family, Baron Evelyn's had the strength of a ferocious blood warrior. However, in front of Gray, he didn't dare to be arrogant. According to the rumors, Gray was only an upper-level blood warrior and was one level lower than him. However, with Gray's potential, he would definitely surpass him. "Uncle Derek, you're too polite. The Fergus family and the Evelyn's family are already connected by marriage. We're already a family. If the Evelyn's family needs help, it's only right for me to help." Gray said politely. "Yeah, Uncle Derek, you're too polite." Bernal added. Right now, a young woman with brown hair was sitting next to him. She was wearing a white lace dress. She had a pretty face and a tall figure. She was his fiancée, Bernice Evelyn's. Okay, I won't be polite with you. I'll remember your gratitude in my heart." Baron Evelyn's had a smile on his face. He was even more satisfied with the marriage with the Fergus family. Originally, his ideal marriage partner was the heir of a noble family, but with the Fergus family situation, Bernal had no chance of inheriting the title. However, in the end, he still agreed to the Fergus family's marriage. The reason was the potential that the Fergus family had shown because of Grey. With Grey around, the Fergus family was likely to become a count's family in the future. Even if Bernal wasn't the heir to the title, his status wouldn't be low in the future. Most importantly, if the Fergus family became an earl, the Evelyn's family's path to becoming a viscount would be much smoother. By the way, I wonder who my opponent is this time? Grey asked. Since he was going to represent the Evelyn's family, he naturally needed to understand his opponent. This was especially so for a battle between blood warriors. Blood warriors who practiced different blood spells had completely different strengths. Logically speaking, with his current strength, no matter what kind of blood spell his opponent practiced, they shouldn't be his opponent. However, in order to not be arrogant, he still decided to understand his opponent's information. This time, the one fighting with the Evelyn's family for the Iron Mine is the Mackintosh family. With the family situation, the most likely person to fight is Geoffrey Mackintosh, a middle-level blood warrior. A man in his early 20s, slightly younger than Bernal, answered. He was Noah Evelyn's, the next heir of the Evelyn's family. Middle-level blood warrior? Grey didn't ask any more questions. Although it was good to be cautious, it was also necessary to have an appropriate amount of confidence. If he didn't even have the confidence to deal with a middle-level blood warrior, then he might as well find a piece of tofu and kill himself. 2 days later, in an empty space near the iron mine, two families that were preparing to fight for the ownership of the iron mine met. They really managed to invite him. In the direction of the Mackintosh family, Baron Mackintosh looked at Grey, who appeared in the Evelyn's family's team, and couldn't help but snort coldly. A trace of a cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Dennis, the opponent is Grey Fergus. I'll have to trouble you this time. He naturally knew about the relationship between the Evelyn's family and the Fergus family. Even so, he still agreed to the battle because he was already prepared. Uncle Doug, don't worry. A man with a high nose nodded. He looked in the direction of Grey. There wasn't a trace of fear in his expression. Instead, he was eager to fight. It's Dennis Corney. Damn it, why is he here? After seeing the man with a high nose who appeared in the Mackintosh family's team, Baron Evelyn's expression became very ugly. He walked in front of Baron Mackintosh with a gloomy expression. Baron Mackintosh, are you trying to tell me that Dennis Corney will represent the Mackintosh family in the battle? I'm indeed going to let Dennis participate in the battle. What? You're allowed to invite Grey Fergus, but I'm not allowed to invite Dennis? Baron Mackintosh sneered. Don't forget that there's a rule in the battle. The person invited must be related to the family. Baron Evelyn's said coldly. Of course I know this. Unfortunately, the Mackintosh family and the Corney family are already in-laws. Baron Mackintosh smiled proudly and looked at the man with a high nose, Dennis Corney. The latter understood and stepped forward. Grey Fergus, I've always wanted to compete with a genius like you. Finally, I have the chance. Please. Dennis Corney extended his hand and gestured to Grey. The man with a high nose, Dennis Corney, walked towards the grass field not far away. Dennis Corney? Grey's face showed a trace of surprise. In the past few months, he had attended many banquets with Viscount Fergus, so he had some understanding of the noble families in the Sydney Marquis territory. Dennis Corney, the leader of this generation of the Baron Corney family. He was 28 years old and had the strength of an upper-level blood warrior. He didn't expect the Mackintosh family to become in-laws with this family in order to fight against the Evelyn's family. Although he was a little surprised, it was just a more powerful opponent. He didn't care and walked straight over. His opponent is actually Dennis Corney. Will Grey? Noah Evelyn's showed a worried expression. Bernice also showed a worried expression. Although they were both upper-level blood warriors, Dennis Corney obviously became an upper-level blood warrior earlier than Grey, and he should have more combat experience. They couldn't help but worry. After all, an iron mine was a huge source of income for a baron like the Evelyn's family. My brother won't lose. Hearing Noah Evelyn's doubtful words, Sarah raised her eyebrows and said with slight dissatisfaction. She knew that Grey was now a murderous blood warrior. How could he lose to an upper-level blood warrior? Don't worry, Grey won't lose. Bernal showed a reassuring smile to Bernice and assured her. The Fergus family didn't intend to reveal that Gray was a murderous blood warrior, so he could only comfort her like this. While they were talking, Gray and Dennis Corney were already fighting not far away. Clang! Dennis Corney unsheathed the weapon at his waist. It was a long and narrow sword with a green color. If he wasn't mistaken, it should be a magic weapon. Fighting for the Iron Mine was a battle of great benefits, so it was necessary to prepare the best weapon. In fact, the Evelyn's family had asked Gray if he needed help preparing a magic weapon. Although they didn't have a suitable one, they could borrow one for Gray, but Gray refused. Whoosh! Holding the green magic weapon, Dennis Corney rushed toward Gray and slashed down with his sword. Under the green sword light, the surrounding weeds were blown toward Gray as if they were hit by a gust of wind. Swish! The green sword light slashed where Gray was, but it didn't cut anything except the weeds. Before that, Gray had already stepped out and left the place. Whoosh! Gray appeared beside Dennis Corney, and the blue and white magic sword turned into a flash of lightning and slashed toward him. But at this moment, Dennis Corney suddenly turned his head and looked in this direction. He turned around and met the attack with his sword. Dennis Corney naturally knew that the Fergus family's blood magic was good at speed, so he was already on guard when Gray dodged the attack and appeared beside him. Clang! Dennis Corney blocked the attack, but before he could take the opportunity to counterattack, he found that Gray had already disappeared and reappeared on the other side. Clang, clang, clang. Gray's sword continued to slash from all directions. Dennis Corney's initial calmness slowly turned into a difficult situation. Facing Gray's surprise attacks from all directions, although Dennis Corney blocked them, he couldn't help but be affected. The effect was very small and could be adjusted with a little time, but Gray's continuous attacks didn't give him any time to adjust. Instead, the effect accumulated. Boom! Finally, the effect accumulated to a certain extent, and Dennis Corney could no longer block Gray's sword. He was directly knocked back by Gray's sword, and his body lost its balance. Gray smirked and chased after his opponent, who was knocked back and lost his balance. This fighting style was the result of his training in the Red Leaf Forest. He had comprehended it while fighting with the Windchaser leopard. Poochie! Seeing Gray chasing after him like a gust of wind, Dennis Corney gritted his teeth. He suddenly stabbed the sword in his hand into the ground, and then poured the power of blood into the sword. The long sword emitted a green light, and the surrounding weeds suddenly seemed to come alive. They grew one after another and attacked Gray. You can't use the attributes of a magic weapon. Gray's smile widened, and the magic sword in his hand was suddenly surrounded by lightning. Crackle! Terrifying lightning exploded, and the weeds that rushed toward Gray turned black and withered in an instant. Not good. Dennis Corney's expression changed drastically. He wanted to pull out his weapon and retreat, but cold sweat suddenly appeared on his forehead.